Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
All right, thanks, Bhuvan. All right, let's start. I will first share my screen on what are we going to be discussing today, right? Like what Bhuvan has explained, it's going to be a 4-hour webinar today. And we are in this topic called data communications and storytelling. Now, before I start, I just want to share with you a little background story of what this is all about. There are many times when I was, be it a junior or now that I have been an analyst for the past 1 decade, it's always something interesting that I see in the room, especially on business reviews, where people tend to talk too much or too little, or when we are having slides that do the talking, and therefore people are getting confused because they are not hearing you. And at the same time, they are trying to figure out what is actually happening on the screen, right? So this course was then specially crafted together with Jamrain, the training provider of today's webinar, on how do we help data professionals to communicate data and turning data into insightful and meaningful action points for the entire company to just work on it together to provide synergy, right? Without further ado, let's just go and take a quick look on our agenda. What we're seeing here is, first, I need to set expectation on what this preview is not about. And then I'm going to go a little bit on the traits of data storyteller. Then we are looking into what exactly is the definition of data visualization and data storytelling. And we will end by sharing you with a little bit of presentation structure. What kind of structures do we have? Is it like a full view, or is it house split or third splits, which I will share with you later, as well as some aesthetic rules before we go on to a little bit of technical discussions, because throughout my entire training, I do have a lot of people also asking questions, like, because I do a lot of Power BI training, right? So a lot of people tend to ask me like, Alex, can I embed certain report visuals into PowerPoint slides? Alex, if I just want to take a screenshot of Power BI into my PowerPoint slides for my presentation, is it possible? Etc. etc. So those are the questions that I will be guiding you guys through, and we will discuss this at the end of the entire agenda today. All right, so let's get started. First, I need to disclaim that this preview is not going to be covering in depth on the workplace and or personality psychological model in depth. Reason is because number one, this is a webinar, and number two, I am not able to see everyone. So I would not be able to quickly profile all of you just by line of sight to see, are you a dominant person, influential person, conscientious person, or a societal person in the essay profile. I would not be able to quickly profile you guys according to MBTI, as well as your VACOG model on your sensory channels. Are you a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner? I would not be able to do that. Therefore, we will not be covering this in depth, right? And moving on to the next part, what must you have, right? The traits of a great data storyteller. So you can see here this entire cycle. You first need to be good in understanding and cater for the needs of business. Meaning to say, you need to understand how to scope certain requirements. And sometimes you'd be faced, or rather, I would say most of the time, by my own experience, there are cases where people actually don't know what do they need to check, right? They do not need, they don't know what kind of visuals do they want to share in certain slides or certain reports or certain dashboards when we are there already. So it's more like I am here ready at your disposal, but unfortunately, you are not able to craft that kind of story with the analyst. Therefore, the analysts are only able to give you subpar presentation slides or reports or dashboards. So those are what we need to have as a business analyst. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, I have been business analyst and I have been enjoying this for the past 10 years of my working life, and it has been very, very insightful, very, very interesting, which I will share more in the next slide as well. Next, we move on to insightful presentation, right? And this is going to be our scope today on this 4-hour webinar on how are we going to turn, be it a report or a dashboard, into insightful presentation. Because a lot of us tend to feel so amped up, right? As analysts, we are so amped up on, okay, I have built great reports, this look beautiful, but then what's the insight? How do I present these insights to my stakeholders who are not in the data department? So I obviously would not be able to give them jargon like, oh, this has to be synced to a cloud. And then after that, in the cloud, it is all in Fabric. And then within this Fabric infrastructure, I am going to create semantic layer on top of it. And then I'm going to enable AI features because right now everybody is on this AI wave. So I would not be able to say any of this because let's say, for example, I have a CEO who is more of a salesperson background, and I also have a chief marketing officer who used to work in big agencies, big marketing agencies like Leo Burnett. They would not understand and they would tune out almost immediately if I'm starting to throw this kind of jargon inside my presentation. So, how do I craft this message, condense it well enough for these people to know, all right, these are the points that I will need to take note of, and then I will make action items from there, right? Next, of course, in the entire life cycle of an analyst or a storyteller is we also sometimes would need to go into detailed analysis. Now, this detailed analysis is more about us going in depth on certain things after probably you're done with a 15 minutes or 30 minutes presentation to your board. And then after that, they are interested with your stories. What happens is they would probably either they themselves or your personal bosses, your direct line manager, would definitely be telling you things after or during the meeting. All right, let us work deeper on this section because I think that the bosses are interested to hear more. So you need to get yourself prepared as well on how to create detailed analysis for follow-up. Next, of course, we are going to be looking into the design and execution. How do you design your report or your dashboard? And then, all of these things, while they seemingly look like they are on different platforms. Let's just say, for example, you are on Microsoft platform, right? Of course, you are going to have your Power BI web. Of course, you're going to have your Power BI web dashboard that is created. Of course, you're also going to have your Power BI web reports. And then you are also going to have your PowerPoint slides during your monthly business review or weekly business reviews or quarterly business reviews. So how are we as analysts going to design and execute all these things to make sure that the color scheme is consistent, to make sure that the story is consistent, and most importantly, to make sure that the tone of voice will be consistent throughout all these different platforms within Microsoft. Now, my client is right now on Google Tech Stack. So we do have things like Google Slides, and then we definitely also have Microsoft equivalent of Google things like Sheets and document, right? We also have dashboards or reports in Google Looker Studio. So it's our job, or rather my job as their consultant, to tell this team of 5 aspiring analysts. on how do you want to craft your story, package them nicely, and make sure it is consistent throughout all these touch points that the stakeholders will be having. And we're looking also through the budgeting and forecasting, maintenance of system operations, be a part of the testing process. This is, I would say, the most critical information, because if you are not in part of the testing process, what's going to happen is you are going to build a delusional but beautiful reports at the end of the day that nobody's going to use. So we have to commit ourselves to make our presence known to the entire working group that, hey, please include me in whatever discussions that you guys are having, because I am the one here who will be figuring out what kind of touch points, what kind of data points, data sources that I need to craft all these stories together so that all of us here can work together for the common good and hit our KPI at the end of this year, right? Now, what type of examples will we cover today? My major projects in analytics the past 10 years cover these companies. Some of you may know, some of you may not know. I was part of EY before this. Ernst & Young previously was known as Ernst & Young, and then after that went into EY. Not as an not as an auditor, but as a data consultant. So my project that I was there was with the Ministry of Finance. I was part under of Laksana. So stories will definitely cover that part as well on data transformation. And then I was also in Coca-Cola as well as the analyst, and then promoted to become their process automation lead. After that, I moved on to Heineken as e-commerce business analyst. And then finally, last year, August, I came out and explored the world for myself. Right. So case studies here are based on this industry's best practices and common reporting requirements, along with my common client pain points. But don't worry, I would assure you that these best practices on visualization approaches are still applicable throughout all the industries, throughout all the departments that you guys may be reporting to. Now, what exactly is data visualization? Right. We are going to go through a little bit glimpse of history, evolution of today's technology, and going to be definitely discussing, is this piece of work that I do considered reporting, or am I actually storytelling? If we are looking into Charles Minard's carte figurative, it is created in 1869 to depict Napoleon's Russian campaign in the dead winter of 1820 to 1830. Right. So this is a publicly available and very, very popular chart. So you can basically go and check this out yourself later on in Google Image, right? So like I said, this map was created and it shows Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia in that winter of 1820 to 1813. The map is widely regarded as a masterpiece of information design, effectively communicating the human cost of Napoleon's ambition. So the first thing that I want to show you here, right? Mind you that this is created in the 1800s to the 1900s. So it's at least a century old, right? And they can come up with such a beautiful visual. And I just want to quickly do a short breakdown of what this chart looked like. First, we have the map that is overlaid to show the terrain from this part of the territory, which belongs to Napoleon. And then this part, it says Moscow. Obviously, the entire thing is in French because, well, Napoleon is a French. right? So it's basically from France, one part of France, to one part of Russia called Moscow. And the orange part here, or beige, is the number of armies that is sent to Moscow, right? So we can see things like Kono, Vilna, and then after that it goes all this path all the way up. That is the advance of the army. And this army is not any other army, by the way. This is the French Grand Armée, which is basically his biggest army force, to and fro, right? And the width of the column here that you may notice that, why is the width here looking a little bit like a twig or a tree branch? It is to show the size of the army. And if you notice, going up and coming down, the size is getting smaller every single time to show that thousands of Napoleon soldiers died of disease, of cold, of starvation, and definitely of the Russian attacks, right? So the next thing that we're seeing here is also the black number is to show you the number that is coming back from Moscow to France, as well as the number of armies that died. Next thing that we have is a line chart, and this line chart is to show you, right, everything here, tableau graphique de la température, which means it is a, let me try to interpret this. It is a graphical table of temperature in degrees to show you how this works and what is the temperature like on their retreat. Hence, you would see lines over here. This is in degrees Celsius, and it is basically showing you the main points that is collected, that it could actually go to below 30 degrees. Imagine just how cold it is, right? And that's where you notice that from here, it's 24 degrees, so it's much more like an aircon that I just set up here. So it's quite okay. But as they progress backwards, you can see that this is -9, -21, and then it goes down to -30, and then it goes down further to -26, and then by the time they came back here, it's already almost nothing, right? So what we see here is something that Professor Edward Tufte famously described this map as the best statistical graphic ever drawn. Mind you, again, this is at least a century old, right? And he highlighted its ability to effectively convey 6 types of data in a single integrated visualization. It covers everything that modern charts strive to cover, which is number one, the number, definitely the number of Napoleon's troops to and back, the number of distance traveled, temperature, the latitude and longitude, hence the map that's overlaid behind, the direction of travel, beige is forward, black is coming back, and location relative to specific date. And this is, I would say, the most important element in modern analytics, which is time. Time series analysis is very, very important in order for us to see what is the trend the past 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, 5 years, depending on what industry that you guys are from. And again, like I said, because I am working, or I used to be working with FMCG industries, so we need to be very, very careful on what happens within the 3-month period and the 6-month period. Anything more than that is more like a reference for us. More or less, these references would be same period last year, right? And also because I was in FMCG, we do have this funny thing called a 443 calendar, right? 445 calendar, sorry. And the 445 calendar basically means within 1 quarter, you are calling it month 1, month 2, month 3 instead of Jan, Feb, March. And you have got 4 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks of each quarter. And that is your 445. Reason is because we want to match. Like if we are talking about month 2, week 3, in year 2025, what is the trend like in month 2, week 3, the previous year, in order for us to make sure that we are adapt enough to capture the market trend. Since obviously Hari Raya and Chinese New Year will always be shifting. So we need to make sure that we can anticipate for all these things. And of course, like I said, that is the FMCG's industry best practices. May not be applicable to all of you here, but it's a fun to know information. Right. Then the next thing that I am looking into in this digital era that we have today, we get caught sometimes, right? Thinking about, am I actually reporting or am I telling a story? Now, I want you all to compare these two for a while, right? And if you can, I would like you all to also be giving reactions in the chat instead of your faces in your profile, because I have got five slides of participants over here. I may not be able to see everyone. So it'll be good that all of you are going to react in the message box. So I want you all to interact with me here a little bit, yeah? So the first visual that I want to show is this one, right? This visual. We don't need to look into the details of it, but just take a quick glance on what that is. Versus the second visual that I am going to show would be something that look like this. Now, if I can, maybe Anis or anyone else in this group, right? Let me know if the first one is D, the second one is RR for report, B for dashboard, or the other way around. The first one is report, the second one is dashboard. I will probably give you guys like 1 or 2 minutes to just type in D for dashboard for 1D, 2R, or 1R, 2D in the chat below here, so that I can roughly gauge your understanding on what each of these actually mean. I'll just give you guys 1 minute, and now it's 9:29. Shamsul say 1D and 2R, all right? Joyce also said the same thing. Anis also said the same thing. And now it's 9:30. Right. And even and Heng also said the same thing, 1D, 2R, and that's exactly right. So when we are looking into this, a report versus dashboard, even Go also got it right, 1D, 2R, right? And when we are looking into this, a dashboard or a report, or I would say, yeah, a dashboard is a data narrative that are built in multiple pages. Right? A lot of people tend to get themselves confused on what is dashboard versus what is report. I am not going to go in depth about that. So let's just assume that they mean quite the same thing, right? So dashboard is this, that it has multiple pages with minimal commentaries, almost none, I would say, right? And almost never also having call to action. CTAs are call to actions. And they are obviously interactive and typically have slicers on the left side, right side, top side, depending on how do you want to design your visuals. For self-discovery analysis, and that is what a typical dashboard or a web report would look like. Whereas storytelling slides, where you guys say that it is R, right, is often presented in slides with curated visuals. And they definitely have narrative anchored in slide titles. So that is what I normally call, either if you guys are into research in master's or PhD, I will call this thesis statement. But most of the time, I will call this as your anchor statement, right? And you have narrative that is anchored, right, with supplementary commentaries if and whenever applicable. And you obviously will be tying business events to data points, because data points are just data points. They do not have a story inherently. I would say that most of the time working with my stakeholders, right? They tend to have a lot of stories that happen outside the report, outside the database. So if I do not talk to any of my business stakeholders, it is near impossible that I can craft stories for our MBR, monthly business reviews. It is near impossible, because how would I know that the distributor is having a system breakdown that is affecting the sales of a particular region? How would I know that because of certain boycott that happens, that actually happened? And I believe that this is not a secret, because it is literally um out in the public press, where a lot of people are boycotting Coca-Cola brand right after COVID because of certain causes that they believe that Coke is uh sending their repatriating their profits to a specific war causes. I'm not going to be discussing any geopolitical issues here, so I'm going to leave it as that. And when that short mini crisis happened, Coke's PR team had to come out and give certain clarification that we are a Malaysian entity and we are not repatriating profits to any causes outside of Malaysia, and we are 100% owned, etc., etc., etc. And there are even I would say advices that was given to us in the team, that salespeople try not to wear Coke t-shirt even though they are representing Coke. Try not to invoke negative public sentiments, because we are afraid that our team may get themselves in trouble if they are wearing that. Yeah. And so these are all the ones that will impact the sales. And if I am just the man who is behind the screen all the time and I do not go out and read news and talk to my team, my insights are basically just stating obvious things that people know that it happened, right? So we have to have things like an anchor statement over here. You are probably going to have some supplementing commentaries and some narrative at the bottom here. So curated, what does curation mean? I am basically taking one part of a chart and putting it into my slide. And maybe I am also complementing it with another part and put it in here. And I might be also having my sales trend to show what happens when it goes up, what happens when it goes down, why does it go down, etc. What is the outlook like for the entire month, or the entire quarter, or the entire remaining of this year, now that we are already in August? So what are we expecting to see by 2025 December? Am I going to hit the target or am I not? What are the things do I need to do? So all of these things are the action items that we need to show. All right. So when we are having all these things is where we move on to a few elements. In fact, I would say there are three elements of what consist of good data storytelling. The first one is none other than data readiness. So how ready your data is, that's point number one. Point number two is this data even reliable? Because yes, right now in the digital era where everybody is throwing everything into the cloud, some would even be as ambitious as going all the way to creating data lake. Yeah, all these fun technologies. Some are exploring all these interesting things and throwing in AI in as well, because right now we are in the age of AI. The past 5 years was more of age of digitization 2.0, right? And then now it's more of AI 1.0 on top of digitization 2.0. And then after that, we have a lot of problems like analysts and team members alike in the entire company. All of us would be asking one question like, okay, what is the definition of revenue? Because team A says revenue is revenue, another team says that is sales, another team says that is turnover. So do they all mean the same or are they not the same? What's the definition here? Who is going to be responsible and accountable and consulted and informed? I'm talking about the RACI matrix, right? RACI. So who are these stakeholders that we need to work together with to make sure that the data is consistent and there is a single source of truth in the vast library of the data set that you have collected, probably at least the past 5 to 10 years. If you're in economics department, well, maybe 20, 30 years, right? So data readiness is one of the major elements. The second element that we are talking about is definitely comprehensible visuals. And what I would like to share here is a lot of people tend to be a little excited, especially when they are working with new visuals. And let's just say, for example, they have just completed our course GRC 101 on an analytical journey of Power BI. So they are very excited and say, oh, wow, now in Power BI, I can actually import custom visuals and do fun stuff. And then they learn more things in GRC 105, which is advanced dashboard principles with Power BI. They get so fired up to the point that sometimes if we leave them unguarded, right? If we leave them without any guardrails, or rather, if I leave them as trainers without any guardrails, there is a high chance that reports that will be produced eventually might look like a Walt Disney animation because they would have a lot of colors inside that may or may not make sense, which is going to create some visual barriers or rather cognitive load to people with um, color blindness deficiencies, right? And they might also be having a lot of visuals that is going to clutter up an entire page and they think that that is a story already, therefore they will just copy paste, or even better, some advanced students or some advanced people like to explore new things as well. Hey, I can actually embed Power BI into my PowerPoint slides, so let's just do that. And then you have got crazy amount of information and unfortunately little space for you to do your commentary, and therefore you tend to rely on just your verbal communication. That's where most communication breakdown happen in a particular meeting. So we need to have and choose comprehensible visuals to complement our stories. And the third one is obviously your compelling narrative. And I would not say that one is more important than the other. I would not say that you can have compelling narrative but horrible visuals and your data is not ready. These three have to work together in tandem. There is no two ways about it, right? You got to make sure that the data is ready. If the data is not ready, then well, you got to talk to your data architect, data engineer, data analyst, whoever in the IT team to make sure what data is reliable for you to proceed doing certain things. What versions of truth that is the most recently aligned with the entire company before you choose whatever that you want to. What visuals would suit best for your stakeholders? Some people prefer tables, some people prefer pie charts. By the way, spoiler alert, I hate pie charts and donut charts alike. I do not like them because they are confusing to me. And I honestly feel hungry when I look at that because yeah, it's a lot of things to digest. And when I am working my mind too much, when my brain is on overload mode, I tend to get hungry very fast. And when I see pie, I really just want to go down and get a slice of pizza or a slice of cake just to de-stress myself with all this cognitive load that I am having in meeting rooms, right? So, of course, when we are having all of these things, the next thing when we talk about data readiness, a lot of people tend to say like, am I going to present everything to show completeness? Because as auditors, as analysts, right? I was an accountant before I become an analyst. So I do have this dilemma as well. Do I present completeness or should I actually remove unnecessary information? So these are the kind of things that I would need to think about when I'm designing slides. When I'm even designing this preview, I need to look into all of these things. Like, are my visuals, meaning to say my slides, are they comprehensible? Am I writing in plain, simple English that everyone here can understand without any technical jargon whatsoever? And are the narrative compelling enough to make you guys glued on to my narrative? Or some of you would probably be listening to me and imagining, because all of this is just stories, not much visuals, right? So you might be treating this as a podcast. I need to consider all of these elements when I'm building this webinar myself, right? All of this with only one aim: to drive decisions in the meeting room, to give people that eureka moment, the aha moment, the light bulb moment, whatever that you want to call it, so that they can take actions, and so that our efforts are not in vain. We are not just building reports after reports with no end in sight. We are actually building reports that matter and drive decisions to the company or to the business unit that you're reporting to, right? So next thing is I want to share you a visual by Gilbert Eikelenboom. So he is a founder and author of People Skills for Analytical Thinkers and is my good friend in LinkedIn. So he created this visual and his entity is called Mind Speaking. Yeah. So he calls it the data business gap. I call it the scope chasm. Why do I call it so dramatically different is because a lot of people just think the gap is something that they can easily and quickly cover. But boy, I have been proven wrong time and time again in this entire 10 years of my career that it is really not as simple as it sounds like. Right? Yes, you can create something easy and quick in your 2 weeks. That's basically what happened when I joined Heineken. That time, my boss was not there yet, number one. And number two, this role that I was in had been vacant for the past 6 months. So I had a lot of things to catch up on, right? I need to understand a lot of things that I don't know. The only thing that I know is I was from Coke, therefore FMCG experiences do somehow help in a way in creating certain slides for certain people to tell stories. And number three, the first week I was in that company, it is very, very timely that the following week, meaning to say my week two, was their ICP, which is their integrated commercial plan. Meaning to say that I had to rush everything out within that 1.5 weeks for me to review with this interim sales consultant who knows the business because she was consulting this client Heineken way longer than me. So she's been in sales. She was a sales consultant for about a good 1.5 years before I joined. So she definitely knows the numbers, and she is a very, very solid and analytical thinker as well. There, I call her my seafood, right? So that time, I had zero clue whatsoever. I only know, like, okay, tell me what are the data sources that I need to get from. Is it in SAP? Is it in a database? Is it Excel? Where do I get it from? So they said, okay, you can go to NetWeaver and get it, which is a OLAP version of SAP. So fine, I go and download everything that I can, and then do some kind of data models in my report. Again, thankfully, I have an experience in Coca-Cola because they are quite similar. That you have your retail outlet universe, which is pretty much your user table, right? Your customer table, and then you have got transactions table, and then after the rest of the things basically will just fall into place naturally as I develop them. And after 3 weeks of sleepless nights creating something, and I showed this Sifu, and she said, okay, your data makes sense. I was relieved, but I was confused at the same time. And I said, Sifu, how do you know that the data makes sense? Because I don't know what I was building. Well, yes, I am happy that you're validating me, that the data are making sense to you, but how? Then she just basically said, well, that is because I am in the industry long enough, in this company, consulting them long enough, so I know my numbers. So on average, I know the sales team are telling me that there are pretty much 20,000 or around 18 to 20,000 active outlets around Malaysia, and you're showing that trend for the past 1 year and it doesn't fluctuate too much. So yes, I can rely on this data. I can rely on this, and I can start crafting my story together with you. So that was where I learned that yes, okay, this still looks like a small gap to me, right? Because I can get it done within 3 days. But then after that, things get more complicated over time. So the gap widens slowly. And then after that, my new boss came in. After she has aligned with the IT director, or rather our big boss, right? It is where more complex requirements and analysis would have to come in place. Not just that 2 days work anymore. That is no longer sustainable. So I need to basically rewire almost a lot of dependencies on how do I make them almost seamlessly for me to just refresh and publish and my job is done. So from small gap gets bigger and bigger and it becomes a chasm, right? So creating trust with business as analysts is not becoming a passive yes man that you are just scoping and delivering everything that the business asks. But what we should do instead is ask questions, follow up with them, follow through, challenge their assumptions. Why do we want to do this? Can we do that instead? How about this one here instead of overcomplicating everything in a particular page in our Power BI report? Blah, blah, blah. Whatever that you want to do. This takes experience, of course. I'm not saying that you can basically go in blindly challenge your sales director. You need to know how to challenge them, right? And here's where I say that I would not be going in depth about reading people's their SC profile or MBTI profile or their sensory channels on how they accept information. I would not be going into that, but those are kind of tips and tricks in understanding your stakeholders and get their buy-in. Okay, so it would be great if you guys have attended some sort of NLP training in your companies before. That will definitely help on reading your audience and basically getting their buy-in. And the next thing, like I said, is to challenge them. Don't be afraid to say no to unrealistic expectations. Like, I mean, if you're expecting me to feed my model that I just created 2-3 days or 2-3 weeks or even 2-3 months into an AI model just because you heard about this new capacity that we have right now, right? And they would say things like, well, our head of DNA says that we have premium capacity. And I read online, I even checked with ChatGPT that if we have premium capacity, we can enable this discovery with AI in Power BI. Of course we can, but it doesn't mean that we do it. We gotta make sure everything is in place first before we even feed anything to AI. I am not against AI. I am just against people using AI blindly or not understanding anything about AI, and then they just see AI for the fun of it. I tend to draw myself away from those discussions because I don't like to get into discussions where people are already biased to certain things. So I would just keep my peace, shake off my dust on my garment, and just live in peace. Right? So with all these things in mind, here is actually where we can overcome fear of conflict. So we are no longer afraid to say no. Rather, we are now able to move away from that to develop practical solutions together. So it's no longer just Alex alone doing all his work, Alex alone coming out with all the solutions. It is now a team effort. And that way, I feel it is a lot better because I will not get myself burned out. It is through this kind of team collaboration actually that makes my consulting job fun in the past 1 year. Now we're moving on to the next thing, right? When I say to show all or not to show all, when we're looking into the first visual, right, we have a typical bar chart of sales in thousands of ringgit, and we have a lot of categories, A till K. And I would say usually when you are sorting them in this kind of order, I know by default we tend to be sorting them by descending order by sales amount. But like I said again, right, when we are working in FMCG, there are certain orders that we would need to sort. Say, for example, in Coca-Cola, or rather their unsweetened tea is A, and they have Heaven and Earth now rebranded as Fuse Tea. They have Sprite, they have Coca-Cola starts with C. So if I'm sorting them by alphabetical order, I would have Ayataka first, Coca-Cola second, and then after that, all the way down, I would have Sprite. But that's not how the industry is presenting the information. The industry would present the information in a way that first category will be CSD, which is your carbonated soft drink. Therefore, must be number one, which is going to be Coke, your classic Coke. And then after that, your Coke Zero. And then after that, Sprite followed on by your tea. Tea followed by firstly Fuse Tea. And then after that, Ayataka. And then after that, water. And then after that, energy, which is your Monster, right? If I were in Heineken, the first thing that I definitely need to show is Heineken, not Anchor, because Anchor starts with A. We have to show them by those priority of orders that is already set in that particular industry. So when I am doing this kind of setup, this kind of sorting, it is already preset according to the country, the companies or industries best standard practices. And of course, when we're looking of anything beyond E, is where it's typically not useful in decision making. It's not important anymore for decision making. Why do I say that? Is because if you notice, there are certain noticeable changes, meaning to say those changes may be small in the grand scheme of things. Let's just say from hundreds of from less than maybe probably 2 to 3 thousand, and then over the next quarter it went up to 10,000, and then the next quarter it slowly rolled up to 20,000. It's still within that 100,000 range here, if you notice, right? It's still negligible. But if you notice the huge trend that is upcoming, then it is advisable for you to create a supporting visual, either in this slide or the other slide, for you to add on certain commentaries if you need to, right? Rather, what I would normally do is on the right side here, where I am grouping the top 5, and then I will group all of these F to K into others. And then if I need to highlight anything, then I would draw another dialog box and refer a separate supplementary chart to this category if I really need to do that. Yeah. And of course, when we are talking about that is where we will cover after our short break. Our short break will be at 10:30. right? So we are going to look into what kind of visuals do we need to complement our stories. But before that, right, let's look into the next thing, which is your comprehensible visuals. How do we build comprehensible visuals using pre-attentive attributes? One thing I like about all of these design principles is it is universal. I have got a book called The Big Book of Dashboards here, right on my table. I got this a few years ago, and a lot more other books incoming about visualization because I need to understand what are the principles that underlie all of these things, including architecture book. I have one book about architecture, designing architecture as in the buildings and landmarks and all that kind of things. I want to understand how humans perceive all these things, right? So we look into orientation, length, width, size, shape, enclosure, color, intensity, position, grouping. So we are going to touch a little bit on color and intensity, maybe a little bit of I would say inclusion orientation as well, for a mini case study later on. But yeah, these are the pre-attentive attributes that we would need to consider. One of the most common thing that I will definitely be using a lot in my reports is definitely my length and width, orientation, size of my chart. Color of my chart is very, very important. The intensity of color that I choose. Like, do I want to gray everything out or make everything else gray, but this month black, for example? The positioning, not so much about the grouping, because when I say grouping, the entire page is about one story and I'm not adding 2 to 3 different narratives in one page. So grouping is pretty much like per page basis. So one thing I enjoy reading, and I got this from Singapore Government Developer Portal, it says here what you see is not what others get. So you need to make them comprehensible because pre-attentive attributes will catch your attention subconsciously. And when you are building your charts and preparing to tell your data story, remove distracting details like what I say from A to K, just put A to E, and then the rest you group it as others, right? And that's how you are removing distracting details and strategize how to bring across your insight. And lastly, we are looking at strengthening your presentation by including a banner statement. Here I say banner statement, earlier I said thesis statement and anchor statement, they all mean the same. Okay, so let's take a quick glance, okay, on these pre-attentive attributes, like I mentioned, right? So these pre-attentive attributes are visual properties that immediately catch our eyes. Whether you are going to pay conscious effort or not. That is your conscious mind. Whether your conscious mind is deliberately paying effort or not, that is not the issue. Pre-attentive works subconsciously. Yeah. So now I would say here's what a typical financial reporting slide would look like. Of course, this is a dummy data that I crafted for GRC 105 Advanced Dashboard Designs with Power BI. But the story that I will be showing here, be it in Power BI, be it in Excel or whatever, this is the common view when I see a financial presentation. And get ready, here is what it's going to look like. It tells you year-to-date profit and loss statement for the month ending 30 July 2025. Very, very good. IFRS compliant, IFRS compliant that you're having a revenue breakdown, your cost of goods sold, your other income, your finance costs, operating expenses, tax, and then lastly, your net profit, right? And then you're going to have a lot of stories that I would say they have a lot to narrate about the data. That you have got your PY over here, your present, your sorry, not your present, your previous year. previous year, Jan to June 2024. And then AC will be Jan to June 2025. And then delta PY, absolute delta PY percentage. And you have got all of these big numbers coming in. And you think that hiding the decimal places would be good enough, right? And then you are going on elaborating for the year to date, first half, we grew by 28%, which is over here, heavily contributed by sales, product sales, which is 52%. Our COGS have increased by 14%. That's where you have this negative, where we are performing, where we are paying more than last year in terms of our COGS, mainly driven by manufacturing of over 40% increase versus last year. And with the net increase of financing costs as well, financing cost is increasing, actually reducing by 46%. So we have improved our financial cost margin, and R&D expenses, our net loss position only improved by 2% year on year. That's unfortunately typically what I hear in boardroom meetings by finance analysts. I'm definitely not talking about the CFO, because the CFO is the one who's going to be receiving all this information. And here is where people get lost. The first 2 minutes, or rather, I would say the first 2 seconds itself. What I normally tell my participants in 101 and 105 is, if you fail to get people's attention in 2 seconds in your page, whatever page that you have, there's a high chance that people are no longer going to be interested to listen to whatever that you're saying, right? So when I see this, and by the way, I have seen worse. So when I see something along this line, within the split second, I would already start tuning out, because I would quickly look into your net profit delta, your revenue delta, and I stop listening entirely. And my eyes would be subconsciously drawn towards figuring out what is the PY percentage delta that is big enough. And then after, I need to walk my eye through like this, right? I'll need to look into here. So this would be my eye tracker. I'll need to look into here because I can't understand any of this. So my eye would just be wobbling through here and then coming back to PY percentage, because I care about PY percentages more than absolute. Also because I am numbers dyslexic. I cannot understand big numbers. I am bad with data entry. So analytics is my saving grace, because I can tell stories with that, right? And then I would then just look down every single row. 41, is there anything else lower than 41? Okay, there's 73, what is this? And then R&D. And then after that, going back and find 41, and then what is this? Oh, manufacturing overhead, this is COGS. And I would already start drawing conclusion in my head. And I don't even listen to whatever the presenter is going to say anymore. So here is where people would be saying, like, do you have any questions? Or normally be keeping quiet, because there's nothing for me to ask. You're basically stating the obvious. I can read and I can understand the P&L. I don't need to ask questions anymore. So what is lacking here in this page is there is no anchor statement at all. The numbers are not truncated. Impacting key stakeholders with visual cognitive overload. So here's what I mean, right? Like, you got to understand, when we are presenting these things, just because Alex has been a chartered accountant, has been an auditor, that does not make Alex quick with his numbers. In fact, I am not. I am horrible with my numbers. Even a 6-digit pin, OTP pin, I'll need to remember them in sequence of 3. So like 1, 2, 3, and then I'll change my screen again. Oh, okay, 5, 7, 8. Then yeah, that's me. My brain just unfortunately is wired this way. And we gotta encounter, or rather we gotta anticipate, what are these things going through every people's mind. Like, what am I anticipating out of these 6, when I say pages here, I'm looking at my screen in Teams here, that there are 6 pages of people. I got to encounter, I have to envision in my head, what does it feel like if I am in your shoes listening to this talk for 4 hours? What will I be getting? at the end of the day. Because of course, in previews, we will not be sharing any materials whatsoever. That is only happening in our paid class, right? So what can I take back? What kind of notes do I want to write when Alex is talking, right? So numbers are not truncated, impacting key stakeholders with visual cognitive overload. When I have overload of visual cognitive, I basically just tune out. I'll just get out of the room for a few minutes and come back in. And then if I'm seeing them still on the same topic, I'll basically be texting my boss, I'm just gonna pack my bag, pack my laptop, and go back outside and focus on the work that you actually want me to do due this weekend or rather due next Monday, right? So I'm gonna tune out from here. If there's anything that is important that you need me to pay attention to, please let me know so that I can catch up with the presenter later on. And that's how I'll just pack my bag and leave the room. I'll say thank you. I'll excuse myself right now because it's too much cognitive overload already. I cannot focus. And we are, like I said, telling the obvious from the P&L with no key insights. By the way, observations are not insights. A lot of people tend to misunderstand that, oh, when I am telling all of these 3 points, right? It is insights. No, they are not. They are observations of what happened the past 6 months versus the past 6 months of the previous year. It is not an insight at all. It's just observation, guys. It is not driving any decision. And short forms are not clarified. If I have marketing guys inside here, what does COGS mean? What does net profit mean? Right? So this kind of situation, let us now, I understand that some of you here may have visual cognitive overload already by now because I am in this slide for over 2 minutes. Let me just step out and give you a story. Just imagine for a minute with me that you have just landed into a massive airport that you have never been to before. You step out of the plane and instantly a wall of noise and movement that's happening around you, people rushing past, pulling bags, and then there are thousands, or not really thousands, probably a few handful of different languages that you don't understand. And you need to catch a connecting flight in the next 40 minutes. You don't know where your gate is because, well, this is not an English speaking country. Honestly, that is the kind of similar experience that I get when I am rushing to catch a connecting flight from Malaysia to Manila, Manila to Narita during Sakura season this year. Thankfully, the land cruise in Manila airport is so good, and they help ease everyone's transition. They have this big placard and said, "Okay, to Narita, put connecting flight to Narita. Please follow me." And then we are basically like following this Pete Piper. So we just follow them through, pass through all this wall of people that's queuing up because they are not rushing. We are, because if we don't go up the next connecting flight, well, bye bye Tokyo. Right? And I honestly dread these moments also when I go into meetings, and especially the ones called business reviews. Because while yes, I can control the output of my team, which is a business analytics team, I am not able to control the output from other participants from the marketing team because I am not the marketing boss. I cannot tell them that please update your visuals better. I cannot do all these things. I mean, we got to protect our boundaries, right? So the next thing is, now imagine you are the HIPPO. HIPPO here stands for highest paid person's opinion, aka big boss, right? So just bear with me for a while and imagine that you are the big boss who came into this meeting room to understand a concept that you have never heard before, and the entire team is like wide-eyed, bushy tails, right? Eager to explain to you everything that they know, probably about AI, probably about other random things that you have never heard about. But they have sort of like been priming you about this the past 1 week or so. That the team is working on this and it is a game changer whatsoever. And then after that, the team lead starts sharing the slides and instantly a gush of confusion. That happened to me. I'm not a hippo, but that happened to me. Right? I'm probably a cockroach, just a small fly on the wall. But when I saw those, my God, it's so busy and cluttered. With no negative space. Negative space is basically whatever that you see over here, right? To give breathing room to the eyes. Yeah. And too many colors, as though that I step into an animation room or graphic designing room. Countless intelligible jargon. I don't even understand what this spark mean or Jarvis or whatever that you want to call these things. I don't understand any of these things. And there are no footnote, guys. Your muscles start to tense. Eyes are straining to understand everything. Like what exactly is this? It's so small, I can't even understand. And begin to lose focus because 2 seconds, I'm a hippo, guys. 2 seconds, I lose my attention, and then here's where I'll start playing my phone, and then after that, doodle on my page. That's what I noticed my boss would do sometimes. In big meetings where I will start seeing her drawing things because she loves drawing. So when I sat beside her and another team member, I'll be just texting my team member, hey, see what boss is drawing on her page. It's yeah, because seriously, when that happened, all of us in my team have started losing attention already. And then like, yeah, we just want to wait, get it through. Of course, I can't leave the room because I have my MD there, I have my CFO there, I have all the chief people there. I can't leave the room. So I am stuck there. Right. On these cases, is where exception holds. I have to observe protocol. I cannot leave because big bosses are in the room. Unless my big boss is also on par, which is a C-suite level, I'll get his permission. But that time, my boss is a C-suite -1, right? So she is part of the leadership team, not the management team. So since she is staying, I cannot leave, right? That is just a protocol, right? So that's where you start to lose focus. And we don't want that to happen. When we are creating our slides, our stories, we do not want these things to happen at all. So now here is what an improved version of financial reporting slide would look like. And here is where it is a combination of two courses. One is GRC 105 again, that's advanced dashboard designs with Power BI, and data storytelling. Obviously, this mastering the art of data storytelling is the course of this preview, right? So what it is going to look like if we are revamping the entire thing is where first I would say things like I said, there are pre-attentive visuals, right? And my anchor statement is clear. For first half of this year, net loss position improved by 2% year on year. Efforts underway to improve sales margin in the second half of the year. That is my anchor statement, and that's all. And then I am going deeper and explain about the R&D costs, because let's say, for example, I'm representing finance team. So I am looking at a negative 73%, meaning to say I have spent about $500,000 more this year versus last year, right? So of course, as if why I'm in finance, therefore we all work together with the financial controller. We definitely need to know why is your R&D cost increasing. If you guys are accountant, probably you guys can understand this, or if you guys are in finance industry, sorry, finance department, you guys definitely will understand this. I'm talking about your IAS 37, right? Here is where Patterson, hold on. I will get back to you on this, yeah. So let me finish this one first. And what we see here is where I am starting to say that the probable economic benefits stemming from 40% of the R&D costs will be capitalized, improving profitability by 9% year on year. Efforts in process, automation, and advanced mechanization aim to reduce manufacturing overhead by 30% of Q3 this year, expects to hit EBIT neutral by first half of next year. Now, let me go and look into Catterson's question. Is it possible to turn off the RTT as it is affecting content? Yeah, thank you, Gerald, for clarifying, because I also noticed that earlier on it wasn't turned on and then now it was turned on. So we are sorry for this I would say inconvenience. Yeah, let's just move forward. So now what we see, as Gerald and Catterson is saying, that honestly as a presenter it is also affecting my attention. So because I'm seeing all these words flying out at the bottom, I'm like, oh God, what am I doing here? Right. So I am trying consciously to ignore at whatever that's happening at the bottom. Okay. Now, let us look at this and break them down in details, right? By looking at what we spoke earlier about all these pre-attentive details. First, we have PY being grayed out, right? PY being grayed out, meaning to say that, well, this is for reference purposes. And I don't need to shout about that. That's number one. Year-to-date performances is visualized using bar charts over here. Yeah. Variances are shown in divergent bar charts, which is here. This is your delta PY absolute. And then this is your delta PY percentage in lollipop chart, also divergent, because I want to see, okay, if I'm looking at minus 0.2 million, how much is it in percentage? Because I have worked with certain bosses that say that if you are showing percentage, please show absolute as well, because they want to see how is it related. Yeah, so this is where I am basically covering a lot already. So this is where we are also sort of like take what we can learn from Minard's cut figurative on the 6-in-1 encapsulating visual. So I have my previous year here, I have my actual here, truncated, so it's easy for people to read quickly. And then I have my visual, I have my bar chart here. I also have, actually, if you notice, you will also see this little gray bar behind, and that is your previous year. And then you have your delta PY absolute and delta PY percentage, right? The anchor statement above here captures the essence of what this visual provides. Pointers, these 3 pointers are insightful, and they are explaining the actions moving forward. So the actions moving forward is, well, I have determined that there are probable future economic benefit of 40%. Out of this 40%, let's just look, R&D, 40% of 1 billion, probably 400,000, can potentially be capitalized. That way, we can improve our profitability by plus 9%. Right now, it's only plus 2%. Yeah. So it is going to be nearer, because right now it is net loss. So it is going to be nearer to zero. Right. And I'm also explaining that, yes, I am understanding. I hear all of you that manufacturing cost has a lot of elements that increase. Rest be assured that I am working together with the supply chain team or whoever, blah, 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 on the automation and advanced mechanization, right? To reduce labor, direct labor costs, and your manufacturing overheads, etc. And this is what, at the end of first half of next year, we are expecting to hit EBIT neutral, which is net profit of net loss of 0. Yeah. So these are the kind of things that these pre-attentive attributes will do, which brings us to a next discourse, and this discourse is called wayfinding. Now, about wayfinding, it is a key aspect. There are a few key aspects of wayfinding, right? You have orientation, and that is where you need to understand your current location and the surrounding environment. You have navigation, which is where you need to plan and execute a route to a desired destination. In this case, we can look at how do we want to navigate our story from slide 1 to slide 2 to slide 3 to slide 4. And then we are helping them on decision making and information delivery as well. Right. So one thing I want to share with you also on wayfinding is my deep impression about Sydney and Tokyo. Sydney is the public transport system where their Victoria My Key was very, very good. And we have this comprehensible notification system through the phone. Malaysia has a far way more to go. I think Singapore also has something similar, but I rarely visit Singapore, so I'm not so sure about that. So yeah, Sydney is definitely quite impressive. And then after that, in Tokyo, the railway system is just subliminal. It's just really, really impressive. It looks so small from that underground tunnel, but actually it's a web underneath. I don't know how the architects do that entire thing. I am really, really impressed. They look so small from the entrance, and when you go in, they still look so small. But then here is where you start going to navigate through a lot of things, and that is the part that is so fun because the signage is providing you direction. I can understand a little bit because my travel buddy challenged me to pick up Japanese 1 month before I go in traveling with him. So I managed to understand a little bit of hiragana and katakana. So the signage helped. Even if I don't understand Japanese, the color coding definitely helped. They also have app for me to just check, and they are thankfully in English, so I can understand where am I going. And I learned that there are more than one ways to get into a direction, not like Malaysia. If I take MRT instead of KTM, I will never get to wherever that I need to, right? Or maybe I'm taking LRT. If instead of Kelana Jaya Putra line, I'm taking Ampang line, I am never gonna get to where I need to get to. That's just how different Malaysia is compared to Japan, right? You also have landmarks. In this, we are using recognizable features to help users orient themselves and remember better. One of these things is where I was in this Sydney administrative street where I see library, parliament, etc. And then that is basically the road I remember to go to this memorial. I forgot the name, that huge building that you have the eternal fire out there as well, right? So those are the landmarks that help me recall how do I go to certain places. By the way, fun fact, I am horrible with directions as well. So if the landmarks are not easy for me to understand, there is a 99% chance that I will get lost. In fact, I will always get lost in Cheras because Cheras is a labyrinth to me. Once I get in there, it needs at least 45 minutes for me to come back to my place here in PJ. I'm afraid to go there, right? So we are also looking into improved user experience, enhanced safety. Safety here is not really appropriate to use here, but pretty much that is the philosophy that we can get, right? Efficient use of space and accessibility. That is what's most important. All right, folks, welcome back. I just want to do a check if I am still audible. Mic test, 1, 2, 3. Am I audible? Owen, can you hear me? All right, thank you so much for your thumbs up. I can see. Thank you, Katterson, for your reaction and your response as well. Great. Now, before I go on, let us just do a quick recap, right? A tour all the way up from slide 1 all the way up, right? Very quickly. What we talk about here so far, like I said, we have covered insightful presentation, and we covered what this visual is about, where you can, this is already a publicly available website. You can go and check this out. We have all of these things here, and then we discuss if it is reporting or telling stories. Where I also see some people here are saying, like Noor Hafiz and Lo from UEM is saying that who is report. Yeah, right. So it's good that everyone is on the same page. Leong Wai Fong and Kylie have earlier on responded as two is a dashboard. Well, we have already covered this, that a dashboard should be the one on the right hand side, left hand side, sorry, my bad. Left hand side, where you have narratives all over in multiple pages or even in one page, right? You also may not have commentaries at all. Like this one does not have commentaries, it's just visuals. Oh, my bad, my bad. Let me just share my screen. All right, Farhan, can you see my screen already? Okay, great. So here is where I was addressing some misunderstanding from the audience here, right? There are people saying that number 2 is a dashboard, number 1 is a report. Well, 2 is more of a report presentation that we are going to share. So maybe the miscommunication, or rather the tagging, was because people have different definition of what dashboard is, right? So these are what I have covered earlier on the differences between what is a dashboard, what is a report. Most important criteria is that our report will have narratives. Dashboards do not have narratives. Yeah. So next thing that we are looking at would be the 3 elements of a good data storytelling. We need to make sure that we have data readiness, visuals that are easy to be understood, as well as compelling narrative, just to drive insights, to deliver insights and action items to our participants, or rather our stakeholders, right? We also ask ourselves a question like, should we present everything or to remove unnecessary info? We covered the scope chasm from a small business gap to get for it to be wider over time as complexities are introduced. So here's where we say that creating trust is not just becoming a yes man. Like what you see here, the data person would normally just say, your wish is my command, and then become a carpet, right? Or a floor mat for people to just step on us and get things done. Our job is not that. In fact, our job is way more strategic than that. So when we discuss the topic of trust, environment needs to be, we have a lot of things, right, that we need to cover. First is environment has to be conducive, where it is safe for everyone to speak up. Team members are helping one another and leveraging strength of the masses. Because honestly, for me, my personal view, whenever that I step into the room, I view everybody as experts. Experts in their own field, and therefore there is always something that I don't know about. So they are the ones who need to tell me, and we are then needing to basically align on the things that we need to work together with. So with all of these elements of trust being in place by the organization, is where we can finally overcome the fear of conflict, and we are no longer afraid of saying no. So we can move on to develop practical solutions with the team together, right? So we can ask difficult questions, we can challenge them, and we are no longer afraid of saying no, and we can stay focused. The next thing that we covered was on data readiness. Here we talk about the other smaller categories. We don't really need all these things, right? So I would basically just group them and call this as others. Okay, so another thing that I also want to share with you is my EY partner, not my romantic partner, but my EY big boss, right? He, in consulting, when we are preparing slides, he shared this very, very interesting um, guideline. He said 3 is good, 5 is best. The reason why 5 is best, just look at our fingers, right? We have, I would say, four. Some people will say 5 fingers, some people say 4 fingers, 1 thumb, doesn't matter, but we have 5 here. So when we have things on our fingertips, it basically means that we can remember all 5 things. That's why we always would tend to remember things in the multiples of 5, right? And of course, if there are bigger things, say for example, if you are talking about your stock exchanges, right? Sometimes these analysts will give the review of the top 10 and bottom 10 indices around the world. That's what I normally see in the news when I was growing up. Top 5 or top 10 of these stock markets around the world, and then bottom 10 or bottom 5 of the stock markets around the world, right? So here is where we normally would say, okay, for you crafting your narrative, 3 is good, 5 is best. And if you're showing visuals, 5 or 10 would be best. So you can filter certain visuals and show things like top 5 or top 10. And of course, when I say that, I am excluding others, right? So if I'm including others, then there will be top 5 plus others, meaning 6. Top 10 would be top 10 plus others, meaning 11 bars. Okay, so these are the kind of things that I would play around and see what fits best. We also talk about pre-attentive attributes, where we say what you see is not what others would get, because obviously I am the nearest to the fire when I'm presenting, when I am preparing all these things, even till late last night, right? I know this content in depth already. So it is then my job to make it including pre-attentive attributes that I can catch your attention subconsciously, that I can help you remember what you can do after this 4 hours webinar. And then I am also sharing with you bad examples versus how do we improve certain visuals so that we can remove all these distracting details. And then we strengthen our presentation by including the anchor statement, banner statement, thesis statement, right? Then we took a quick look on this basic, or rather I would say a BAU kind of chart, a BAU, business as usual kind of presentation in finance. And then we talked about airplanes, we talk about, imagine that we are the big boss. What would it feel like if we were in our big boss shoe? Before we present, it is good for us to understand how the other person think about us, or think about the visuals that we are showing, or think about the entire story, right? Are all these stories coherent? If the stories are not coherent, there are 2 ways to do this. One is either you put it into appendix, or number 2, you just remove it entirely. So it really depends on what needs to be included in your cases, right? And we talked about this. We basically did a facelifting of that number heavy visual to something lighter, to something that we accentuate certain elements here by showing you green and red bar. By the way, this green and red are colorblind friendly, right? So people with colorblind deficiencies will be able to determine what is the green and what is the red. Yeah. Instead of some, there are actually 7 types of color blindness in the world, and unfortunately it hits guys more than ladies, where ladies are unfortunately also the carrier of this gene to males. This is already statistically proven by WHO. Yeah. So this color scheme that I selected, these 2 hex codes that I selected, are colorblind friendly. Although you may not see this as red and green, you will see these of different colors, whatever color blindness that you may have, right? So you will be not confused when you see this chart, because the color that I selected, that again, all of these are based on statistics and deep research done around the world already on what green fits best, green versus red, on what green versus red fits best in your visuals when you are presenting it to unknown folks with color blindness. And then we also talked about wayfinding. And here is where I am going on to the next chapter. Yeah. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to cut short this entire sharing to 12:30. So all of you may have questions. If you have questions later on, then of course you can drop us questions. And then we are also going to allow Puvan, our marketing expert, to just like he said this morning, right? There are some exclusive deals for all of you here, right? So now let's go on and look into this compelling narrative. With that, I will also be adding on the 4 elements that I have discussed in wayfinding. I was just walking you guys through this. I was talking about orientation, navigation, decision making, and information delivery. I understand that this is not, excuse me, explicitly written in this slide, neither was I verbalizing anything on this slide. So what I'm going to do is bring these 4 aspects into this page here, where how do we want to craft compelling data narrative? First is in a typical story, right? Whatever story you want to talk about. The most recent story that I watched was Fantastic Four. It was great, but not super great. And whatever stories, right? You always would have this storyline arc, we call it, and it always start with a setting. Where are you? What is the context? And what is the hook that you want to bring people's attention to you? And then we go out all the way. Here is where we normally, after we have that introduction, is where we want to build anticipation upwards and upwards until that the climax, and then after that the resolution, right? So what I have been demonstrating the entire time, if you want to break this down technically, I started my setting and hook with a story about, imagine that the troubles that we have when we are sitting in board meetings. Before I even shared anything, I was starting off with that story, because stories hook people naturally, almost naturally, or rather I would say almost most people, right, are hooked with stories. And then I walked you guys through to the rising insights by showing you guys the elements on what good storytelling is, right? The 3 elements of this compelling narrative. And then after that, I bring them all together and show you how are we supposed to close that bridge. And then after that, I have the climax. The climax is obviously the what I personally call it, the ugly chart versus the beautiful finance chart. Yeah. And then after that, resolution and CTA, the call to action, which is what this whole thing is about. We are pretty much going towards the resolution stage right now. So you would expect, like, after you have that aha moment, to see that beautiful visual that is compelling, right? That is driving decisions, that is helping people to understand your numbers better. The non-finance folks can understand your numbers better already, right? So here is where we would be going on to that resolution stage to bring the energy down a little bit, to ground everybody back up, right? So if you're looking at this typical narrative arc, we are definitely going to have our orientation and navigation here, right? We are giving the context and the navigation that, hey, we are going upwards towards the rising insight, or downwards if the rising insight is a bad news, right? And then after that, why do we actually need to do all these things? One thing I like about Stephen Covey, it says that you have to start with an N in your mind. Even Simon Sinek would say start with your why. So my why and my N that I have in my mind is to get people to commit to certain action items and call to actions and to agree on certain things, to align on certain things. That is why we are spending hours and hours in a week or in a month for meetings, because we are working with a lot of people, and a lot of people have different um learning spectrum. Some people understand better with text, some people understand better with voice, some people understand better by clicking around. So we got to align on all these things to make sure that all concerns are met on a weekly basis, so that we can basically do a safe landing by the end of the year, right? So the reason why we're doing all of this, the end in mind that we have, is to deliver the information in a clear and concise manner so that decision making can take place seamlessly and quickly, right? And of course, while this art looks like this, what I typically do is normally spend about half a day if the insights are quite easy for me to extract, right? Assuming that I already have all the data points that I am working on, and I am already quite familiar with all of these data points that I have. What I do is then play around. And as I play around, I would start building my storylines. My slides are basically my storyboards. I would then first put in like, okay, what is this chart going to show? What is that chart going to show? What is the story? How am I going to move from one to the other, etc., etc. So if I were to show you, right, or walk you through in your mind about that financial presentation slide, maybe the first slide would be that, and then after the subsequent slides would be the efforts that I have discussed with the R&D director on how do we increase efficiency, on how do we capitalize the R&D expenses, that 40% of it I will cover on the second slide. And the third slide, I will definitely be covering on the advanced mechanization. So here's probably where I'll be getting the supply chain manager or the supply chain director to do his sharing. So here is where I collaborate with all these departmental experts, you would say, to create a compelling narrative together. It's not just a one-man show, by the way. I would say that it is almost never a one-man show. Of course, in my younger days, in my earlier days of my career, I always assumed that this was a one-man show, and more it has been a tiring journey, and I burn out after 3 months. So it's definitely not a one-man show. It's definitely a team effort. And the sooner you realize that as a data storyteller, the sooner you realize that as a data analyst, you would find your way a lot more pleasant. Your journey would be a lot more pleasant and meaningful, because you would then see that you are growing together with the team, right? It's no longer a disjoint between you versus them or them versus you. It's not us against the world anymore. It is us together with them to create impactful changes, right? So what I normally do, like I said, after presenting, after drafting out my story, be it on pages, on physical notepad because I enjoy scribbling, or be it on slides, depends, right? I don't know. It changes from time to time and from complexity to complexity. Some things that are super complex, I would need to write them down on a piece of paper because I don't even know where to start, right? Some that are so easy that these people are so clear with what they have and what stories that they want to say. I would just go on to my PC and start drafting stories there. Excuse me. And therefore, it is best to identify your aha moment first and then build your narrative around it. So once you have your aha moment, it is much easier for you to contextualize everything Where do you want to start your orientation and navigation? If you don't know where to start, again, let's just take a financial report for an example. What's best is just go and read everything that is on the website by Bursa, that any companies, right? Any, I would say any good companies with the integrated reporting, right? So here is where you can learn how they report certain things on the industry that's relevant to you, so that you can basically understand very quickly what and where they are talking about. Because let's just assume that you are a Sendirian Berhad and you still have to do press releases to your internal stakeholders and your shareholders. Or rather, I would say, when I say shareholders, it's basically your JVs, right? Your angel investors. They want to know the numbers. So you need to check. It's a lot of reference that you need, which I will share more on the next slide, right? So you need to start somewhere on how these big boys that is publishing their annual reports into Bursa. If you want to be fancy, you can by all means go and check out New York Stock Exchange and NYSE on their annual reports. Although, of course, that they are using US GAAP instead of IFRS, it doesn't change the story. You can speak in different languages, but that does not change the story. The essence would still remain the same wherever you go, right? And the next thing we have to then, okay, once we already find our foundation and then we have our aha moment at the end, right? We have to find something in between. What is the one that can close that gap? And that gap is where we have to insert this kind of, I would say, investigative narrative, whatever else that you can find from the data. It's more of observation basis, right? And then leading to insights. And these insights would then lead into aha moment. So again, if we are looking into that financial slides, what I would do in my setting and hook before that aha moment would definitely be something like, okay, this is our sales trend, this is our expenses trend, etc. It's gonna be keeping it brief. 1 to 2 slides is more than enough. And then after that, I am going big with that visual that you saw earlier. And then after that, going on to the next action item, explain a little bit more, or rather, like I said, right? Let the R&D director explain how do they want to capitalize at 40%. How do they justify that they have already reached a reliable estimate of a future economic benefit according to IFRS. Otherwise, your finance director will not buy that news, will not buy that story, right? So on those cases, we need to speak the lingo that the other person who we need buy-in from. Yeah. So IFRS is the CFO's lingo. I need to work with the R&D guy to speak his lingo. So here is where also, as a business analyst, your job is to close gaps in between departments. I have a lot of projects that I have heard feedback that finance and IT cannot talk because they both don't understand each other, especially my favorite when we are doing SAP migration to S4HANA. Finance talk T code, IT don't know T code because T codes don't exist in the database. They have base tables. And of course, finance don't understand base tables. Only SAP experts understand base tables, right? Or the ABAPers, we call it. So here's where I have to step in and to understand, okay, this is the visual, that this is the report that you are generating. I will need to talk to the ABAPer. I need to talk to the IT expert, the data engineers, the data architects on what are the similar base tables that we need to compose this KE24 or SE16 and whatever you want to call it, right? Because finance bread and butter basically relies on these two main files. If an analyst fails to deliver this bare minimum expectation for our stakeholders, the finance stakeholders, I would say that we have unfortunately failed to do our part correctly, right? So it's good for us to have this in mind. How do we want to set the stage up? what kind of hook do we want to bring into the table? What are the rising insights that we want to share? What are the investigations that lead to the final outcome? And the final outcome is your aha moment, right? And out of the aha moment, what do you inspire to have is your resolutions and your CTAs, your call to actions. Like, am I delivering the information successfully or my God, I'm sorry, tongue tied, unsuccessfully, right? And we need to, how to gauge that is actually very simple. We are gauging that simply by looking into decision making. Is a decision process immediately kicking off close to the end of the meeting? If the decision making process has really um, been in place, then well, that's great. We have done our job well. All right. Which leads me to the next slide. And the next slide is about Sir Terry Pratchett. So Pratchett is renowned for his sharp satire and thought-provoking humor, which is evident in his fantastical world and characters. His everyday tool includes parody, irony, and comedic comparisons, which he uses brilliantly to critique the evils of social institutions such as religion, politics, media, so much more. You can read up any of his books, right? He was one of those writers who are so good because his writing transcends age. You can think of him as J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter. I would think that everybody here at least have heard of Harry Potter. If you don't read the books, okay. I admit I am a book nerd. I am a bookworm. I have a lot of books, physical books here in PJ. I have a lot more books in my hometown. And I read books. I love reading books. I love being inside the world of books. I have 7 series of Harry Potter. So if you have not read Harry Potter books, at least you have heard of this. You know about the synopsis. You probably have at least watched one of the 7 or 8 installments of Harry Potter. Yeah. So Sir Terry Pratchett is quite similar to J.K. Rowling in this sense that his stories transcend ages. People from all age groups, from all ethnics enjoy their movies. And his writing is very relatable because he effectively conveys these themes through meticulous layering, allow readers to choose their level of indulgence. Surface level comedy, adventure, deep dive into philosophy, ethics, whatever. So this is also something that we can learn from, right? And he shared 3 tips in his writing, which I think this is actually good for us as well when we are creating our narrative. The first thing is we have to believe in the story that we write. And when I say story, I am not talking about unethical window dressing story. We don't want to end up like that. We have to report the truth and only the truth. No sugarcoating, but we have to believe. We have to believe the end that we have in our mind. How to do that is we have to believe in the insights that we present. Don't just show numbers. Be convinced that by your own analysis, you have to know, right? If you're unsure about your data quality, your audience will sense it, really. I was in performance art. So one of these performance coach tells us during this kind of step that we are doing. I was in choir, so choir has a bit of choreography, and he basically said that if you feel like you are going through a funeral procession in that period, your entire audience will feel it. So if you walk with pride, although it feels like a funeral procession, but if you change your mind and you think that this is a grand revolution instead of a funeral procession, your audience will feel it too. And that's what I mean. If you are unsure of your data quality or interpretation, your audience will definitely feel it. So to overcome that and to have confidence, you have to validate your data sources, double, triple, quadruple, multiple times of check on your calculations. Are your formula correct, for example? your codes are written correctly, making sure everything is as foolproof as possible, checking with every operational guys around because they know their numbers better than us because they see the numbers every day. They know the trend every day. Even if they don't see the numbers, they can do that sense check with you. Is the number projecting correctly? Like what I said, my Sifu, right? Who said that, your numbers make sense. Okay, then we also need to make sure that the narrative aligns with the fact. Of course, sometimes if you are unsure of the story, the narrative can go both sides, although it is basically the same thing, like two sides of the same coin. We have to make sure what side of the coin is up that we want to show our audience. Is it head or tail? So that we are not confusing the audience. A lot of people also, I noticed that we tend to have this feedback in my meetings that I have. Some of it are to me and some of it are me giving to other people where they say things like I don't see this in your slide. Will you have separate slides somewhere? Most of the time the answers that we get is, oh no, this is just my notes that I am sharing. So of course then the next point here is okay, then can you please share your visual next time so that we can follow your narrative. So that I would say a gap is already formed right there in the presentation, and people's attention has really started to drift apart. Okay, so for example, when you're presenting churn analysis, stand by your reasoning on why certain customer segments are leaving. Do your homework, and there is no other tip that I can give you except that. Do your homework. Check with the sales team, check with the analysts, check with anyone and everyone that you can to bring your story to life. Then you can bring this story out to people with confidence, right? And the next thing that I have is use cliches to your advantage. The cliche here is not like a lot of people, right, including myself, to be honest, we tend to have this funny expression like bar charts only, the whole page, it's a little boring, don't you think? No, it's actually not. If you are looking into, if your company is ever lucky enough to have consultants, right? You would notice that most consultant slides are boring. When I say boring, they are all mostly grayscale. So that's the part that we are actually thinking that, hey, they are boring, but no, they are actually showing professionalism and they are showing colors where it matters most. If it is not anything that makes sense, I would not show numbers like that visual that financial chart visual. I only show red and green, and the bar charts that you see are all in grayscale. The numbers are in grayscale. The font is also in black, right? So here is where we are not supposed to avoid them because they work. Why do they work? Because it's easy to understand. Like for me, and I agree with a few seasoned data analysts, we all agree that pie charts is not easy to be understood. I'm sorry, pie charts is not easy to be understood. Anything more than 5 categories in a pie chart is where confusion hits and you are losing your audience. You can innovate, of course, within these formats, but keep the structure recognizable so that the audience can focus on the message, on the insight, on the story that you want to say, rather than decoding your method. Like, what is your point? I am hearing you talk for 10 minutes on the same slide, but I still don't see your point. So we have to use cliches to your advantage. And of course, the next one, read everything and anything, right? Expose yourself to diverse data stories and all sorts of other stories. Like I said, I get my inspiration from wayfinding. Wayfinding is an architecture discipline on signages, on date, on how data is being shown, because to me data is everywhere. That's how geeky I am, right? And good data storytellers actually draw inspiration from many, many domains, not just your own domain. Not just like me. I don't just follow people and I don't just buy books on dashboards. I also have other interests that I am playing with. Like I have 8 aquarium tanks in my house. I have got a lot of plants. You can probably see some behind here. Yeah, I have got probably a mini oasis in my house. I am learning through all of this and how do these things interact with one another. Because if I am able, or rather if we all are able to have this mental flexibility on looking at one thing and be interpreting it differently in different contexts, that would be great. I do bread as well. So sourdough bread, one thing that I learned about sourdough bread is you can't force things. Because yes, you can put a lot more starter and they are definitely going to grow a lot faster, but the taste is not going to be good. So you can't force things. And I always tell my friends who are like, wow, you bake bread? I said, yeah. But normally I will bake it 2 days in advance because I need 2 days of the entire process to come up with 2 loaves of bread. So with that, I have learned that to create good stories, to create good bread that tastes great, according to the profile that I want, when I'm mixing the bread and do whatever that I'm doing, it all shares the same discipline. And the discipline starts with the letter P, ends with the letter E, is called patience. We have to be patient. Some things can't be rushed. All right. So we have to draw inspirations from many domains: industry benchmark, historical data sets, behavioral studies. Behavioral studies is where I am going to read up a lot about spectrums of mental disorders like ADHD, BPD, bipolar, you name it. I just need to understand how human brain works, right? And then after that, we also have non-business stories about how one of the best stories that I read is actually Le Petit Prince, which is the Little Prince, if I recall, right? It is a very short read, but it is so beautiful and easy to understand that I can still remember them. In fact, all the books that I have in my library back in my hometown, when I see the title and the book spine, I would still roughly remember what the stories are 90% of the time. The 10% are when I get bad books that I read 3 to 4 times and I still couldn't understand and I gave up on them. But yeah, I still leave it there because I enjoy collecting books. Okay. And like another example that I can give you on this is a marketing analyst might learn from public health data storytelling techniques where urgent clarity is key. When I say urgent clarity is where you have to respond to a PR crisis, like what happened to Coldplay in the US. You probably have heard about it. Like, how do we want to respond to all these things? We have to check. One thing that I can leverage on if I were in PR probably is to see how our public health shares stories during COVID, how important it is for us to be relevant and stay timely with the progress that is changing. Because if we do not handle this, it is going to blow out of scale and it's going to be very, very detrimental. Right. So the takeaway that I can share with you is number one, own your insight because confidence comes from rigorous analysis. Like I said, there is no shortcut to telling a good story. You have to do your homework. Number two, use familiar form, leverage known visuals, bar charts, column charts, line charts. Stick to this. These are the best charts that people can be familiar with. Donut chart, try not to use it if people are not familiar with, and any other things, try not to introduce too many new things like radio charts and all this kind of Mayan calendar chart. We call it sunburst. We need to try to avoid all of this. Otherwise, it's going to get too much, and people's attention are just going to be trying to decode what your visual is instead of whatever that you want to tell. And number three is feed your brain widely with diverse input to make it richer, and you can then create more relatable narratives, right? Now, let us do a 5 to 10 minutes. Now it's 10:25. Let's maybe end this at 10:30, and then I will share with you something. So we're going to do this mini case study for preview session only. So this is exclusive for all of you here today, right? We are going to show you what is the as is state of a sales report. Now it's 10:25 a.m. I do not know what I said that. My bad. I meant 10:25 a.m. Right? And then we're going to go into a 5-minute discussion, right, on scribbling on this page and suggest at least 3. I see. Yeah, okay. Suggest at least 3 improvements. I will be sharing this right now, and let's get ready. And then after that, I will show you my improved visual. Okay, so let me turn off my full screen mode. And then after that, I will show you what the next slide is. Let me try to minimize this as much as I can. Right, hide the ribbon. How do I unhide the ribbon? Okay, hide them, hide them, hide them. I still can't hide them. Okay, never mind. This would probably be big enough. Okay, I'm gonna copy my placeholder and then going to get your input right now. Like, based on everything that you have learned since the beginning of at 9 plus until now, what have you learned and what's wrong with this page? We are gonna give you probably 5 to 10 minutes of it until 10:30, 10:35 before I show you the next page. So what we have here is H1Y25, which is the first half of this year's sales trend by category. And then we have our narrative here, 3-point narrative, explaining to you during the first half of the year, sales performance by category can be observed in the bar chart presented above. Category A had the highest value, followed by B, C, D. And then after that, we have category A reaching 600,000 in sales, category B trailed slightly behind, and the entire block of essay went on and on and on, right? And the third one is where it is important to know that F and K had sales that were much lower than the top 5 categories. They occupied the lower portion, had much shorter bars, therefore representing smaller percentage. Okay, Catterson, fonts are small, long explanation. Small F to K can be categorized as others. Okay, so now I'm just going to copy and paste this, right? And write what you say, F to K, others. And then we also have this one. Problem number 1 is font too small. Problem number 2 is explanation essays. My God, it's too long, right? Let me just make this a little smaller as well. Bring it in smaller. Okay. Now, okay. Number 3, Rachel says that observations is not insights. There is nothing insightful at all about the entire long-winded slides. What else? Can anyone share anything? Let me just minimize this a little bit. You guys may not see these core categories are A, B, and C. Okay, so now that you see this whole page, and yeah, you can start commenting any other thing. Catterson or Rachel or Kylie, Waifong. Leong says sort the sales dollar from higher value to smaller value. Okay. There is 2 ways about it. So this is where I would discuss further with you. Sort sales value in descending. Okay. So I would want to have a small disagreement with you, right? Leong. Reason is because at the note here, it says core categories are A, B, and C. If we are sorting sales in descending order, D is going to be up here already. So the audience may not understand, like, why is D number 3 instead of C? Because we have always been seeing C at the end of the top 3. Okay, so that's my point here. And Shamsul says put the sales value at each bar. Okay, this is good. This is very, very good. I also want to ask you, yeah, Shamsul, you can continue commenting in the comment in the chat below. When I am presenting the sales value at each of these bar here, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, do I need to also show my, are you also suggesting to keep my x-axis or drop it? Okay, Samsul, so this is my follow-up question to you. So let me just put this in. Data labels would be what Shamsul has said. Catherine says, Catterson, sorry. And okay, Shamsul says can drop. Okay, wait. Oh, wow, I did not expect myself to be so busy right now managing the chat. Okay, drop x-axis. And going back to Catterson, who says probably can summarize the finding for decision making. Okay, so this one I'm just going to add number 4, summarize for decision making. Okay, and then I see Ting is providing provide reason why C reduced in sales volume. Exactly. And he also explained, present the sales 600 to 1,000 unit, or basically truncating the numbers. This is actually already truncated over here. Thankfully, it's already in 1,000. So when I'm seeing 500, it means 500,000 already. Yeah. And I believe what you mean is here, is it, Tay? The 600,000 here, we are okay, Tay explains that correctly. So he is saying that instead of us giving big numbers over here, we should just put 0.6 M or 600K in the narrative, which is good. Okay, again, this is on number 5. Truncate numbers in commentary. And Rachel, nice, no problem statement. So what's your point, right? Like when I see this, like problem statement, guys, what's exactly happening? Like, why am I seeing this? What is your context, right? What else? We have 2 more minutes before I show you the next one. Okay, hold on. I just missed out Tay, who says that no provide reason why C reduce. Okay, so that is basically your insight. Number 6, no insights to why C reduce, because reason why they says this is because C is part of the core category. You are not providing insights why C has dropped and D has increased. Now what's this point? Why am I in this meeting, right? Why am I wasting my time? I need to understand all of these things so that I can help the team to make better decisions. Right. Okay, let's go on. 2 more minutes. What else do we have? Right. Okay, 1 more minute. I see at least one more area of improvement. It would be great if some of you can pick that up, and hopefully in our physical class, let me know who you are if you're attending, and I will treat you a good lunch or tea break or whatever. I'm just gonna wait for 1 minute for you to identify what is the problem that I have in mind, that I say there's one more. Yes, you are right, and I hope that you will come to our meeting, our training, and I promise you that I will be giving you a good meal. Okay, I will remember your name. Change the color of core categories. I may disagree with it, but you are quite close. So instead of giving you a good meal, I'm probably giving you a good cup of coffee from my favorite store called One Half in PJ. Right? They serve the best coffee around. Okay, your suggestion is change color of, oops, sorry, my bad typo. Change core cat color. Okay. What else? Okay, now it's 35. Let me just put this back on full screen mode. So we can quickly see what are our hard work, right? So our hard work here is we talked about there's no problem statement. Sort sales dollar by descending value. Change core category color of ABC into different color. I may disagree with this, but I agree that color is probably a problem here. Shamso talked about data label and dropping the x-axis. Catterson also talked about F and K group to others, font size too small, too long. Oops, sorry. And observation is not insight. That's what Rachel said. Summarize for decision making. And we have truncating numbers. That's what Dave says. Make 600,000 into smaller numbers so that our brain is easy to digest all these big numbers, right? And then no insight to why C reduce. These are big problems. This, I mean, in a note here, I am already saying that, hey, A, B, C are core categories. That's why Ang says maybe A, B, C we change to different color, right? We also need to explain why C dropped and why D is like suddenly higher, right? So now what I will do in a storytelling narrative, instead of giving all this boring mumbo jumbo, I will share this instead. I will have my anchor statement. And in my anchor statement, I say category A sales lackluster versus last year. Suggesting a drop in consumer spending power. Category A. I was only focusing on category A. Okay. And here is where I also have a supplementary visual card over here to explain to you when I say lackluster versus last year, what exactly do I mean by that? But I am not going to have it in big bold on your face kind of thing, because this is just a reference for those people who are more of the C type. The C type are the detail-driven, conscientious person. Okay, so I am basically meeting the needs of these people. Okay, and instead of me putting in sales in thousand and then my title of the chart is first half sales trend by category, what I did is changing it into a question. What is the sales trend by category? When I am changing this into a question, I notice the effectiveness of my storytelling has improved. This is not my tip. This is more like a tip given by an author. I don't know if the book is here. I don't think so, so I can't share. But his name is Brent Dykes, who shared on effective data storytelling. Yeah, that is a great book. If you don't have it, buy it and read it. It's a great, great book. So he says, change your title into question. And that would basically improve people's engagement. And it basically drives people to discuss things better with you. At first, I was just trying to figure out, does it actually make sense? Let me try to test this with my audience. So the next time when I had a C-suite meeting in that group, right? It's more like a board meeting that I was just there to support. I am not talking, or rather I would say that I'm not supposed to talk. So I'm just there supporting my boss when she wants to clarify something. I am there to explain to her, so that I can complement her story. So I can notice the CFO is actually reiterating and verbalizing what is the sales trend by category for the first half of this year. So when he does that, he's actually thinking, because bosses like questions. So that's how I noticed that, hey, that tip actually worked. And from there, every single time when I'm building reports or storytelling narratives, I will have my questions. But of course, if I'm building an operational report or a dashboard in Power BI with multiple pages, I will not have questions. I will just keep my title short and sweet, like sales category, sales trend by category, full stop. So it depends on where is my visual going to be used. Okay. And then what else do I have here? I explained that sales in category D overtook category C. So they had read my mind. I am not providing the reason why, that category C has reduced, but this one, I am explaining that category D had overtaken category C. That might signal the shift in consumer preference. So say for example, all this while you have been selling sweet tea and suddenly kombucha sales is going up, it sometimes mean that people are getting more and more health conscious. So what are we supposed to do? What is our action plan? Marketing team, what do you have to say? Sales team, did you notice this? What is the command on the ground? What do you want to say? How can we capture this? And here is where my boss probably asked me, like, Alex, can I clarify with you? When is this trend starting? I said, probably when this happens, this page would be done probably 1 week before the board meeting. I would have gone through countless iterations with her. And then I would definitely be aligning with her day and night throughout, right, the entire week. And I will definitely be adding appendices, or even if it is not in the appendix, because sometimes this is a consolidated deck, I will already have my deck separately. Yeah. Thank you, Gerald, for sharing. That is the exact book by Brent Dykes, Effective Data Storytelling. That is a great book that I highly recommend. And Gerald likes this Storytelling with Data by Cole Nussbaumer. Also not a bad book. A lot of people are recommending that as well. I personally have not read that book, so I am not able to comment on that. Okay. I will also be leaving the last part of it later on to basically have a Q&A. If you guys have any questions on any books that I have in my personal library that I can vouch for you guys, I will also be sharing that if you want, okay? So back to this. What I also do, right, is to show ABC into this pie chart. I know I said I hate pie charts, but I am allowing myself through this if it is less than 5 categories. In this case, it is less than 5. I have my core, which comprises ABC. I have then my D and E, which is my top 5 generally, and then I have 7% of others. So also to agree with Shamso, I have already included my data bars, data labels over here, and I removed my x-axis. There is a reason why I do that, which I will be sharing with you shortly. So the key improvement here is we have compelling narrative using banner statement, complemented with a YOY benchmark. We change the color to grayscale. So on this, right, change the color of core categories. And when you are presenting multiple categories, you would probably be inspired by some reports consultants write, right? They would normally have grayscale. And when I have grayscale is basically this different color. This part, the core, which is the ABC, will be black. And then after that, it will get grayer and grayer as it progresses below the scale. Okay, so this is how I would use color. And I added data label, and this is Edward Tufte's principle, which I will be discussing in the subsequent slides. So don't worry about that. We are also using enclosure to highlight core categories. Remember the pre-attentive attributes that I have enclosures. I'm putting in blue instead of red because blue complements gray best. It is not stealing the attention because red steals the attention. I do not want to steal your attention. I just want to guide your eyes gently this way to see what is the sales contribution. And I also have a comment here to say that while it still dominates, concerted marketing efforts will be required to target and defend user base. That is my CTA on this one slide. And then of course, subsequent slides before and after is where then I need more data points, right? So good job, well done. Thank you so much for your interaction the past 10 minutes. Now, I also want to show you another thing. Oh, before that, when I am commenting about this concerted marketing effort, I am actually signaling the users of this report or this audience in this meeting that I can easily transition to my next slides on market share, assuming that this is FMCG. Market share will be the next thing, right? That I need to show how big is our brand versus competitor brand and all that kind of stuff. Marketing cost analysis, this is where I'm going deeper into the detailed analysis. If you remember that the 8 process life cycle of data storytelling. So those are the things. So if I want to summarize, okay, everything that I have said earlier, we have an anchor statement. So the eyes will go in a Z pattern. Okay, category sales lackluster. I am a quick reader. So over here, I will then quickly be notified by this minus 61%. Okay, so this is alarming. Then the next thing is sales trend. I'm going to see ABC is being highlighted. I am not looking into this yet. And then I will see here, okay, core category dominates marketing effort, and I will then move up here to category D, sales overtaken, signaling shift. So I am already creating anticipation, the resolution of this page. I am creating my aha moment here. Then the subsequent page can be transitioned over to market share. Market share is where I will then drill down into the signaling of preference on consumer preference, right? Is there a shift or is it just a hype? Is this a short-term hype or is this a concerning shift? And then after that, I am also going to be talking about marketing costs. This is where I can then insert my P&L, etc., etc. Right? So here is where I will interweave my stories with other people's points, right? And this is basically how I cook my slides. Okay. Now we are moving on to the next topic, and this topic is called presentation structure fundamentals. We have two key fundamentals. One is Tafti's principles. The other one is Gestalt's principle. And then we are going to cover your full page, half page, and third splits. Is it 2-1 or 1-2 split? We will discuss this later. So now let's look into Edward Tufte's principle. Okay, sometimes he's known as ET. He is an American statistician and professor emeritus in political science, statistics, and computer science at Yale University. He is noted for his writing in information design and as a pioneer in the field of data visualization. And as I am writing this yesterday, I just realized that he had 3 books and I just bought his 3 books in Amazon. So I am looking forward to read more of his books, right? So here, his principles central tenet is basically point number 1, maximize data to ink ratio. By that, I mean reduce clutter. By that, I mean gray out information that you don't need. By that, I mean emphasize on certain things that matter. This is where Ang and Shamsul got it right, and as well as they, right? Truncating your numbers, adding data label, drop the x-axis, change the core category to different colors. So all of this is revolving around maximizing your data to ink ratio. There are a lot of variations to this. Hence, a principle is just a principle. It's not rules, right? We basically have to understand the principles deeply and personally so that we can basically play around with whatever that we want on the visuals. Minimize chart junk. Data over design variation. Here is where in my GRC 105, advanced dashboard principles, dashboard designs with Power BI, I will disclaim on my first 5 minutes, I said that I am not an statistician. I am not a makeup artist. This course is not going to be showing you how to make a report pretty, because it is pointless if you have pretty reports but useless. I am here to guide you on making your reports functional. It is a 2-day workshop, a case study on a horrible visual and how do we change horrible dashboard into a beautiful dashboard. That was our 2 days. It's purely functional. I would say aesthetics wise is only like 10% or less. Boring colors, really, just gray. Green, gray, that's it. Not much fancy colors, no Walt Disney colors, no fancy visuals as well. Spark lines, line charts, area charts, which is a variation of line charts anyway. We have mostly bar charts instead of column chart as well for specific reasons, only for the case, right? So those are the things. Using small multiples here, I would use it with care. We care, I mean only if I am showing breakdown, right? So if I'm going back to the previous slide here, if I want to, I will show in a published Power BI report the trend of A, B, C, D, E, and others as small multiples. Just for analytics, data exploration purpose, I'm definitely not going to call out any of this unless otherwise needed. Maybe I will call out trend D in a separate chart, or like I said, appendix, depends on what my boss wants. Okay, provide context. Like what Rachel said, no problem statement. Of course, we have to always provide context. And in one thing that I learned in public speaking, or effective communication, verbal communications, is we have to assume zero context. We have to assume that these people don't know anything at all, and it is our job to brief them that statement or whatever problems that we have. It may take longer, like I tend to sort of nag a little too much. So we all have improvements, right? For me, I need to improve myself in making sure that it is short, it is a shorter brief. And some people may need to learn how to make their brief longer because sometimes things can get a little bit complicated. Or the last time I heard about this is probably 3 months ago. I have so many things that happened the past 3 months. I have forgotten everything. So yeah, I need you to spend like 5 minutes instead of 1 minute to recap whatever that you need to tell me. Or rather, recap everything that we have discussed the past 3 months. And then after that, tell me what you want to tell me next so that I can make my decision. Provide context. So here, the next slide is talking about Gestalt's principle. The earlier slide was talking about Edward Tufte's principle. Now it's on Gestalt's principles. There are 6 principles here. And Swapnil says that Gestalt principles are in the mind, not in your eyes. Because these are set of principles in psychology that describe how humans perceive visual elements as organized patterns, as wholes rather than separate components. This is where we do our Mensa IQ test, right? These principles explain how our brains group and interpret visual information, blah, 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 right? This blah, blah, blah mean that how do you perceive shape, how do you perceive object, how do you perceive relation of element A to everything else, element A to B, etc., etc. How one page transitions to the other. It is all that is in the mind, not in your eyes. So principle of similarity is your invariance. People seek to form connection between similar observations to make prediction. If everything up here is red, if I'm putting this dot here as green, I will know that this has to fill in the blank or maybe gray. And I ask you to fill in the blank, it will be red. If over here I ask you to fill in the blank, you will put me and tell me that this is blue. So this is law of similarity. The next one is law of pregnance, not pregnance. Okay, pregnance. People break complex or ambiguous images and perceive them in the simplest form. This is an Olympic symbol. I don't care what color goes in first. To me, for the past 20 years, as long as I remember this icon, right? Every 4 years, we will see this once. I don't care what color it is. I only know that it's 3 circles up, 2 circles below. Whether it overlaps or it doesn't, I don't really know. That's how I am explaining to you what is the meaning of law of pregnance or law of good figure. The next thing is law of proximity or emergence. People group objects like this object here and this object here. They would normally mean similar things if I'm seeing them in the same page, right? But they mean different things. Same, but different lah, in a way, I would say, right? Like, for example, maybe if you even notice, if you go into fine dining, how they would place your plates, you have got probably 3 sets of fork and spoon, and then you have got a small fork and spoon that's in front of you. The context would tell you that, oh, okay, I'm going to have dessert later, right? And if you have a butter knife, oh, right, okay, I am going to have my bread of a basket of bread, right? And my plates, I will then see if I have 3 stacks of plates. If I have 3 stacks of plates, I will definitely know that it is a 3 course meal plus dessert. Maybe that is gonna make it like a 4 to 5 course meal kind of thing. I don't know, but well, it depends, right? It all depends on the context and the proximity. And of course, table manners teach us to eat from outside in. Like if you have whatever fork and spoon or soup spoon, whatever you want to call it, is from the outside, then you got to eat from outside, going in, going in, going in, as the waiters are taking away your finished your plates and your bowls or whatever. Okay, that is the law of proximity. Continuation here is to tell you how patterns flow. There is a flow in pattern. I do not know what I heard. Okay, so we have about 70 people here. Maybe some of you here are into aquascaping like I do. If you do, there is one thing, or maybe even plants, whatever, right? We do probably share some common hobby together in terms of arrangement of aesthetic things at our home, on how do we decorate certain things. One thing I learned, this is a very beautiful discipline that I am still learning. I am not a pro at all. This is only my 8th time that I'm starting to do this exercise, and it is called Iwagumi. Iwagumi is basically the placement of rocks that show the natural flow. Gerald, if you can, maybe you can go and find some nice rockscapes and show it to the team here to get people understand. Like when I'm looking at an Iwagumi scape in aquarium, right? It will tell me that it is a visual balance. It has to be balanced because nature is more, if you are all familiar with this concept called wabi sabi, which is loosely translated, it's a big philosophy that I'm not joking, I don't know it, but a deep philosophy that can be summarized in 3 words: perfection in imperfection. So we got to realize that, and it has to have a visual flow in everything that we see. And here is where it helps me to arrange certain things in my aquariums, arrange certain things in my slides, arrange certain things in my narrative that I am showing people. Yeah, that one, Iwagumi rock for aquascaping. This is one of the common scaping method. Of course, there are more than one, and it's a whole principle behind that, right? Then you would see just by this simple design, it only comprises 3 things, or maybe 4, 5. Okay, 5. Minus the tank, you would need your water, you would need your grass, and then you would need your stone, you would need your fish, and you would need your soil. And it would give you that kind of visual anchor. And that visual anchor is what we want in our data storytelling. We want them to capture what is important. We also need to show the flow, like what we see in this Iwagumi scape that Gerald shared. It is a flow that it is going upwards, like it is going through a passage of time, that these tectonic plates in the earth crust has moved, and it formed mountains on the top. So this is a typical Iwagumi scape. It looks easy, but trust me, it took me 3 days just to arrange 3 stones in my 40 cm cube, 40 cm aquarium. It is not easy. It is simple, yes, but it is definitely not easy. The simpler it is, actually, it is not easy. Yeah. So with that, we are talking about that that continuity, like what Gerald said, it gives him the impression that this is a volcano formation over time, because everything is flat in the beginning of time, and then as the earth move, the earth crust rotates, then this is the things where mountains, that's how a Banjaran Titiwangsa came about. Earlier on, it was nothing. I mean, that's what my geography teacher told me when I was in Form 3. It is the biggest Banjaran that blocks the east coast to the Straits of Malacca. Otherwise, when there is monsoon, the entire Malaysia will be swept already for sure, right? So that is the law of continuity. And a law of closure is where we are talking about us recognizing and closing a specific case, a specific visual. Not just visual. I would even say for those of you here, maybe a few of you know a little bit about theory of music. And theory of music, we study about the 4-1 cadence, 5-1 cadence, 4-5 cadence, and 5-1 cadence. It basically brings us after a suspense. We need to bring it down. If we don't, we will feel weird. It's like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. And then stops that our brain would need to end it with a do, right? So that is the principle of closure, or we call it reification, right? And here, when I see these 4 arrows, I don't see these 4 arrows. I see this as a closed diamond in my mind, because like what Swapnil says, the principles are in the mind, not in the eyes. All right. And the last one is the common region. So the common region, if you notice over here, right, you have these 2 dots that are similar. You would think that they are together because of law of proximity. But if you have borders surrounding them, you would then know that these 2 are actually from 2 different sets of elements, right? So it is important for you to embody all of this. As a matter of fact, the visuals that I shared earlier, the improved visual is a combination of all of this and Tufte's principle, okay? Now, we go to our variant on showing stories. Just imagine I am having a half screen here right now, because this is supposed to be one whole page in your PowerPoint slide. You can have your slide title here. This is variant 1. This is when your typical key visual, normally time series or whatever, and you have nothing else to show, right? Because it is already self-explanatory, everybody knows about it already. Then you just put your commentary here, call it a day, finish this in 1 minute, move on to the next slide. Sometimes you may want to have a little bit more explanation. After your line chart here, you can have your commentary here of your extra notes that you want to add on, and your slide title, which is again your anchor statement. So what I would normally tell myself, if I am not able to elaborate on my anchor statement, I'm just going with variant 1. If I feel that it is a bit empty, then I need to figure out how else am I able to group them in a slide. If you know, sometimes you would know when a slide is too empty. And when it is too empty, well, you obviously know what you need to improve on, right? Next is us going into hub split. Hub split is what you already saw earlier on in variant 1. I have that slide title. My key visual, right, is probably here. This is the financial visual, if you remember. I have my slide title, which is my anchor statement, and then my key visual is the IBCS compliant financial report. Okay, IBCS. I have the book here right now. It's called International Business Communication Standards. Okay. Also, you can get it in Amazon. Don't worry, it's quite a short read. I will definitely be covering that in depth in our full course already. Okay, so if you don't want to read the book, you can attend our 2-day workshop, and we can go through the 6 principles in IBCS on how are we supposed to to narrate stories, especially when it comes to variances and or financial presentation. So I have my IBCS compliant visual here just now, and my commentary was here. I purposely put my commentary to 3 points because I say 3 is good, 5 is best. I don't think I need to go to 5, so I chose 3. Okay. Supplementary invariant 2 is what you saw just now with the one that we all discussed with Tay, with Shamsul, with Catterson, with Rachel, right? We have the slide title. This is our bar chart of A to E, and then we have the other at the bottom here. And then I also have this breakdown or category where I was not putting a breakdown actually. I was putting a, it's not a breakout, but a drill up and using a chart, using a pie chart, because I want to show the distribution, the part to whole distribution, right? And I had my commentary in text box. I don't have this here like this, but I had my commentary in, I would say, a dialog box. Now I want to show you next of how a half split layout would look like in my real consulting experience. Example, I have done this for my client, and of course I have anonymized everything here, otherwise I would get sued. Okay, so this is region A's city who has the highest impression. So this one, the context is we are doing SEO analytics. SEO is search engine optimization for an e-commerce platform in Malaysia, right? So what I have here is question, what are the top 5 impressions in thousands and the CTR? So this is already a company-wide jargon. I don't need to explain what this is. This is, but for all of you, CTR means click-through rate. Out of so many impressions that you see on let's say Shopee app, right? How many ads do you actually click through? That is the click-through rate, right? In this region. So I have total impression, and I'm highlighting this in blue. The reason why I highlighted it in blue is because I didn't know earlier, and this was probably done a year ago. So I have learned, and I'm just making it quick visual for all of you here to just digest. Okay. And the red dot is the CTR. And then I have the blue line, the dashed blue line as the average CTR, which is, so here is where I was also being very, very careful when I'm playing with double axis. On the left side, you have total impression. On the right side, you have the percentage in CTR. Honestly, if I am forced to do double axis, the secondary y-axis will only and always be in percentage. Otherwise, the data that I'm going to show will not make sense at all, right? So what I have here is a commentary here explaining why is the CTR here so high, but our impression is so low, whereas this one, it is quite high. This is 8.8%, high impression, but low CTR. So what's going on here, guys? And then another thing that I have, if you notice, I have this 5 over here, right? This is 5,000. And I have this line to guide people that, hey, this is my maximum. Because when we are looking into CTR, we are also looking into number of clicks. This is my supplementary visual. So all of these are the categories of what you see here. And here I am explaining, hey, you know what? This third bar over here can actually be improved. So that's why I'm drawing this red line, because I wanted people's attention here. Okay. And then this is where I'm saying that region A has highest impression but lowest CTR of 8.8. This is where I put red because this is not a good news. And like I said, I am not sugarcoating. I am just telling you what is. Okay. So the other thing that I also want to share. So earlier on, we talked about full page, variant 1, variant 2. And then we talk about the half split, also variant 1, variant 2. And then now we talk about the third splits. So we can have 3 visuals. To me personally, based on all the past works that I have done in my previous companies, I find if you ever want to show your visuals, the maximum you can go is 3 elements in one page. Nothing more than that, because anything more than that, you would have it looking too ugly and too slim already. But of course, there is a small exception. And that exception is my next slide over here. This is basically the context is a survey analysis split by multiple channels. And here is why I had rainbow colors. I know I said I am not supposed to be putting rainbow colors, but this is what my client wanted. Okay, fine. That's why I put it. Otherwise, I would have put this all in grayscale, right? What you notice here is a typical tree split variation. This one here, you notice this width of this key visual is bigger. And then I am going to be putting my summary, or like what Rachel said, a problem statement of 10 words or under. Why? Because a typical English sentence is 10 words. Of course, I'm not talking about compound sentences that you have your uses of conjunctions and all that stuff that can drag on to 50 words. But well, an anchor statement only has that amount of space for you to use, and you can and should only pick up until 10. That's the best baseline that I can give you. Of course, again, there are exceptions, so do what fits you best. Okay, then what you see here also, the ones in black lines are of similar sizes because I want to de-emphasize them, but I am showing my breakdown. That's point number one. Point number two, you also see that I'm splitting horizontally and vertically on certain things because, well, this is channel group 1 and this is channel group 2. And this line here, the vertical dotted line here, is for me to break your visual to show you what is key visual versus what is complementary visual. And here, I would also make sure that the width of this 3 complementary visuals are of the same width when I'm spacing them apart. What I also have here for comparability purposes, I am setting the maximum horizontal axis on this chart, on these breakdown charts. Remember, Tufte's principle is to show smaller multiples. So this is my smaller multiples, right? I have total and then I have smaller. So I can tell them A, B, and C here. What contributes to the big red dot here is from channel C, and this is the category that we are looking at, right? So on and so forth. And how do I want to make them comparable to one another is, yes, I know that this is 150. And if I squeeze all of this into 150, that would be great, but it would squeeze everything else here too small. I don't want that. So the, what's that word called? The compromise that I am willing to take is to make this 100, because 100 is still divisible by 5, 10, and 20. So I can have like, hey, this is 25, 50, 75, 10. Although, yes, this is in absolute, I can also quickly take a look at this and see that, okay, for this red line, red color here, it is nearing 75%, something like that, right? So this is how I would show if I am telling something based on third splits view. Now, there are obviously other visual appeals, and I will end this in the next 15 minutes. So first is what the hex, all right? And we also have chart types to avoid, and I don't call OCD as obsessive compulsive disorder. I call this as obsessive compulsive determination in making your slides look good. Okay, so here is where I have my color scheme. And this color scheme is what you will get. This is IBCS compliant. You will get this in my full 2-day workshop that I will teach you. I will give you this IBCS compliant report or JSON theme in Power BI. I will give that file to you and teach you how to import that. So moving forward, you can just apply this color code inside your report instead of you having to manually do it every single time you create reports. Okay. This is my predetermined defined color scheme. The only thing that is different here is this extra. And I came up with this color code because I find this most suitable to cover across all of these bars of color. Yeah. If you don't know yet, Power BI has 10 color schemes, or rather they call it swatches, right? 2 of which is already fixed, meaning to say we can only customize up to 8. So these are the 8 colors that I can customize. The first 2 are not customizable, which is your scale of black and your scale of white. That is not customizable. That is fixed. All right. And when we're looking into this, the next thing, why the heck should I bother, right? It is to provide us the visual harmony and aesthetics. It's to make sure that our brand and identity is coherent. We also want to promote user experience, that they don't feel like they just went on to Mars and came back with zero understanding of what happened in that meeting, right? And definitely emotional impact. When I see red, what does that mean? When I see green, what does that mean? It gives me emotional impact the same way as music. Like when you are creating music, when you're listening to music, you would be emotionally impacted by it one way or another. If you go for clubbing, then you would feel like you're dancing, you're full of energy. And if it is in a funeral, obviously you do not expect people to play you here happy birthday song, right? You'll be playing a much more mellower, much more solemn kind of song, and probably some of you may have those kind of chanting depending on your religion. All of these are very solemn. So, and all of us will also be wearing either black or white. We will not be wearing red, right? So it colors bring emotion as well, depending on how do you use them. Now, here is the chart types to avoid at all costs, not exhaustive. I will definitely be covering all of this a lot more in GRC 105. Okay, so here we have the bad. The bad pie charts are okay if they are used for less than 5 categories, or in this case, it's fine because the categories are quite short. If your categories are long, please don't do that. It's gonna make people, me, I will feel dizzy looking at that slide, right? And the number 2 here, the bad one, is area chart is okay if you want to show sales cannibalization, meaning to say like adoption rate of A versus B. You want to retire A and then you're expecting B to shoot up and then A to come down. Area chart is fine for that reason. But if you're having all of this, sales by format inflation adjusted, I personally think that this may be a bit too much because of a few reasons. First reason, you need to choose what colors would fit into all of these. I have got 7 colors here. Good luck finding your color theme to see all 6 or 7 of these match. It's not easy. It looks simple, but it is not easy. We have the banner, which I would say the ugly ones. This is a map that I call a tree map, right? That shows you from big to small. It is comprising 100%. One thing I also learned in the FMCG industry is a Marimekko chart, or Mekko chart in short, where it is telling you the scale of 100% on both X and Y axis. Right here, you can see that the second category is huge, and out of which it is driven by blue and green. In fact, it's quite hard for me to see, even though I don't have colorblind. Like this blue may be looking quite the same with the green up here and the turquoise up here. For some people with the green cone deficiency in their eyes. Okay. And the worst is to avoid this at all freaking costs, and I mean it at all costs. Radar chart is terrible. This is a radar chart. Some people call it the Spider-Man chart, spiderweb chart, whatever. You can enjoy the movie, but do not bring it into your visual because this is so confusing. It's so confusing. Just as how you are changing your axis in your radar chart, it will give you different interpretation when it actually means the same thing. So this is to be avoided at all costs. 3D chart, never use it. I know last time, probably 20 to 25 years ago, a lot of people quite like to use this chart because, well, it's something new. And that time, the science or visual data visualization is not as strong and statistically, scientifically tested back then. But right now, we know better. Okay, so next thing is our OCD. Formatting, like what Dave said, it matters a lot, right? Pick numbers, truncate them into 1 to 2 decimal places. And percentage, typically I will put into 1 decimal place. Unless you're in R&D working with a lot of scientific data, then fine. That is an exception because that is your nature of work. There you obviously need to have your 4 decimal places. Or in statistics, it's called 4 significant figures, right? Borders on visuals, I like this because I like to see tiles that are beautifully arranged. Without borders, it looks empty, right? Data labels versus axis value. So here is where Shamsul has pointed out, and here is again where I implemented Edward Tufte's principle, where we are increasing our data to ink ratio by dropping the x-axis and adding the data label here, therefore increasing the data that people are getting instead of too much ink. Choice of colors, set your themes. And choice of charts, make sure that it is easy to follow. Okay, now my last 8 minutes here will be covering on the technical discussions. Should I use Power BI embedded? Is it a yes or a no in a visual, right? And what are the workarounds using this in Excel? And this definitely will just walk you guys through, but I will be covering this in my full 2-day course. Okay, so the first question, a lot of people would tend to ask, if some of you here have attended my one-on-one, you would be familiar with this chart already. So this chart is what I'm basically just, this is an embedded chart, by the way. Let me just get out of this and show you that this is actually a Power BI chart. Okay, if I click here, you can see that it is changing dynamically. So this is embedded, right? So one thing that I want to warn you guys is, a lot of people in my one-on-one, they like to ask like, okay, I have this Power BI report and I know that I can embed these visuals. Can I do that? You can, if you know what you're doing, because you can embed the entire page. Like this is an entire page with the filters and whatnot, but you cannot embed a certain visual. There is still that limitation right now. So you can't do that. Okay, so you need to get it published first into Power BI Web, into your workspace, and then after that, you can embed the entire report page. You cannot embed a single visual. If I just want to show a sales trend, I cannot embed that yet for now. Okay, it is also very time consuming when you already have your entire data model, and you will need to do an ad hoc analysis. Imagine this, that you need to go back into your Power BI file. Sometimes this Power BI does not have whatever that you need, so you need to go back to the kitchen. I call it the kitchen, which is your Power Query. Redo certain models just to add on more layers into your semantic model, and then publishing it again. And then after that, do your visuals. After do your visuals, then you need to make sure that it is all well placed in a PowerPoint slide. All this hard work just for that 2-hour discussion, and nobody's going to ever look into that again. That is a bit of a boo-boo, I would say, right? So even that, sometimes you want to do something advanced, you would need to know some SVG. SVG is some scalable vector graphics. Okay, you would need to know some code in SVG, some code in Vega, Dinette, if you are really going into all this advanced custom visualizations that you will not even find it in your Power BI web store for visuals. Okay, so you gotta know how you want to show this. Okay, so now what? This is where I have learned this when I was working with Heineken a few years ago. Well, we are in premium capacity. Okay, that company was in premium capacity. So what I have is, well, I talked to the IT manager who manages the capacity and said, okay, when I have premium capacity, all of us that are developers are given a pro license. So when we have pro license, we can share reports, etc. That one is on Power BI administration. I'm not covering that. So what I did in my semantic layer buildup, I am first going into my SharePoint and collect everything from my SharePoint into my Power BI report. And then if I have any other things that I want to connect to, I would then use the other cloud connectors. Last time, 10 years ago, when I first started using Power BI, there is no such thing. And you have to build your custom connectors, and it was a pain in the neck. But right now, it is so much easier. You have a lot of APIs that are readily available, and all you need is to just get an API key or API token from whoever, and you can start connecting to that data source already, right? And with that, you can then do your data model, do your data cleanup, set everything up into a Power BI report, publish it to the web, and this is where some of you here may already know it's called a semantic model. When you publish a report up, you would see two things. One is a semantic model. I will share with you shortly, if time permits, a semantic model and a report view in Power BI Web workspace, right? So when I already have that semantic model embedded into that workspace, what I do when I need to do advanced visuals and I do not want to be constrained within the Power BI, because Power BI app is very RAM intensive as well. I would just go and connect this using Excel, right? I will get pivot table and I will choose from Power BI Web, and then I will have on my right bar to show me what kind of reports that I can take based on those that I have access to, select them. I have already successfully imported all of my entire model into Excel without consuming space because, well, this is Live Connect. And then I'll play around with pivot tables, convert the pivot tables to cube functions. If you are familiar with cube functions, good for you. If you are not, well, cube functions is basically a type of function that allows you to interact with the data model in pivot tables in Excel. Okay, this cube does not exist in Power BI or anywhere else, not even Google Looker. Okay. And if you want to do that, intermediate spreadsheet modeling is needed for you to play around with that. And then lastly, you can customize charts in Excel, which is a lot easier. Trust me, I have built stack chart and a bar chart as clustered column charts before. It was nearly impossible for me to code this in SVG DAX. I basically just use it and I was done in 1 hour. Yes, it was a learning curve, of course, because I've never done that before. And now if you ask me, I have forgotten how to do that. But it is definitely easier to do that in Excel compared to Power BI. And then after that, what I do is, well, I need this for MBR. I'm just going to copy that visual and paste it into my PowerPoint as linked chart so that it doesn't come out as a JPEG, so that I can size and I can do whatever squeezing and stretching that I want with these visuals, and they will never go out of proportion. And then once I'm done with that, every single month when a new MBR comes in, I am just gonna make sure that my Power BI is refreshed in the web, and then I will hit refresh in my Power Pivot pivot table in Excel, and then after that, go back to my PowerPoint slides and refresh the visuals. This is a real story. The entire team, before I implemented this, took them 1 entire week prior to MBR, and it is always a stressful
week for everyone when this happens. Yeah. But as I explored this with the team, instead of 5 working days that they have to only focus on this and nothing else, they have saved a lot of time and they can complete all of this in less than 1 day. So the remaining 4 days is where they can gather more stories after aligning with our boss before we show this to our big boss. And of course, when our boss, our immediate boss is not so happy, wants to change certain things, certain visuals and all that, we have that 4 day gap to play around before our meeting. So this is really a time saver for the entire team, I would say. Okay, I have come to an end, right? The summary of this whole presentation is report and dashboarding is not data storytelling. That's the first key takeaway. The second thing is on data completeness, we don't need to show everything. That is not useful for decision making. That's what Catterson said. Group everything F2K to others, right? 3 attentive attributes. Have your enclosures, have your color hues, etc. Color hues is what Ang has mentioned, to add the colors differently to show different emphasis. Avoid complicated charts that are hard to decipher. But of course, macro chart, if you are familiar with macro chart and everybody uses that, fine, you can use that. But if nobody's familiar with it, don't introduce something and create that barrier to change. Yeah. Next is number 5, to maximize data to ink ratio according to Tufte's principle. Choose your colors carefully and be mindful of people who are colorblind. And yeah, that's basically my 6 item. Oh, yes. And the last one is that one learning point probably for all of you is that we can import Power BI models into Excel for our ad hoc report.